Cultfigga TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know I'm your humble host, the Yao Ming of Revolution, and we got to get right back to our World War III alert over Jim Crow Joe is sleepwalking us right into a very dangerous situation. Be sure to wipe your feet coming into the House of Revolution. That's hitting the like button. Be sure to subscribe to the channel. We're almost over 1,000 to unlock this channel, 1,000 subscribers to share this message. But let's get right into this very, very, very devastating information we're finna get into, that our life in danger, our wallet is in danger, all because of the imperial policies of Jim Crow Joe.
Up in our faces. Do we even have a Middle East strategy at all? Our next guest just posted this on X and says, what happens in Gaza is not going to go away. It's left a permanent mark on the people of the region. They were told they too are animals. They deserve the worst, that they too deserve to be exterminated. They will not tolerate this. This is going to blow up in everyone's face. And over the past 24 hours, multiple missile strikes, massive strikes by Iran on Israeli Mossad targets in Iraq, claiming to have hit a Mossad headquarters. So shit has hit the fan by all accounts. And the man that predicted it is here with us right now, Colonel Douglas Macgregor. Colonel, welcome back to the show. I mean, you were spot on in what was about to happen here, blowing up in everyone's face. This sort of Mideast strategy by the Biden administration doesn't appear to be a strategy at all. What is your assessment over the past 24 hours of these massive strikes?
Well, I don't think it's an accident that these strikes were launched during the Iowa caucus period. I think these strikes are meaningful on multiple levels. First of all, you had very precise targeting and the use of extremely effective, precise ballistic missiles that penetrated all the air defense networks that exist on our side and in Iraq, in Syria, and so forth. So they managed to get these missiles through. And if you look at the targets, one, it was a house that contained a Mossad agent. He happens to be Kurdish, but he's a Mossad agent working for the Israelis, and his family in that house. And as far as I know, he and his family members were vaporized. People initially tried to argue it was a strike against us. No Americans were targeted. All the targets were related to Israeli operatives, Kurdish operatives, and ISIS operatives up in Syria, who were involved in the killings, the killings of the leading figures in Lebanon by the Israelis, and the killings of Iranian troops in Syria. So this was not accidental. It was carefully planned. And remember, the Iranians had said that there will be a reckoning. We will strike back. And they did nothing for some period of time, and then suddenly, right on schedule with the caucus, you get these very precise missile strikes. On another level, they were trying to demonstrate, if you think we're a pushover, if you want to go to war with us, understand something. We can do this all over the region, particularly in Israel. And they have an enormous missile arsenal that could level Israeli cities. And they know that the next step towards escalation, which is what the Israelis are doing, and we've now escalated.
It's the most powerful military in the Middle East. And just because Israel got them nuclear bombs, that don't mean nothing. They can't use them. Anybody use them, everybody gonna use them. So you got to have a conventional army or asymmetrical army like Iran has in Hezbollah, in arming Hamas, arming Iraqi militias, in helping the Houthi rebels. If you don't have them type of tentacles, you won't defeat Iran in the Middle East. And like Colonel Macgregor said, this was a warning. I told you yesterday, this is a warning to the U.S. We can put missiles through a window from 1,000 miles away when you lied and told people we couldn't. And this is very, very, this morning I got some information that they removed some U.S. troops from a base in Syria because they were shook over this. Because everybody in Washington instead of saying bomb Iran, Iran showing them if we wanted to bomb you, we could.
In support of them against Yemen is to attack Hezbollah or precipitate a conflict with Hezbollah that allows the Israelis with support from us to go in and obliterate most of southern Lebanon. And they've simply said, we're going to be in a position to strike back. And it will be something that you're not prepared for. That was the message. So this is another step, I should say not a step, but we're sliding further down the mountainside into the ravine of despair and war. And there is no strategy. Our strategy in the Middle East is to do exactly what Mr. Netanyahu wants us to do. That's all. He has far more influence in Washington than Biden. And Biden has said, yes, send them. Yes, yes, yes. Remember, Biden, if you go back and look at him in the past, he had a number of red lines in Eastern Europe. He said, well, we're not going to give the Ukrainians any of our tanks. We're not going to give the Ukrainians rocket artillery. We're not going to give the Ukrainians X, Y, Z. We're not going to give them any tactical ballistic missiles. We're not going to do these things because it would mean World War III. It could mean World War III. What's he done? He's crossed all of those red lines.
Mm-hmm.
Now, none of it has worked, and Ukraine is finished. It's prostrate. Millions of people have left the country. The country is in abject poverty. The government is criminal in terms of its corruption and behavior. It's more oppressive than any other government in the region. And yet we continue to feed this myth that somehow or another this is a fight for freedom. It has nothing to do with it. It's all a fight to harm Russia, which hasn't worked. But no one wants to admit that. You go to the Middle East, one war is winding down. The new war is ramping up. And there are people who think that if we provide enough air and naval power to the Israelis and some special ops forces,
Not going to work.
That they can pretty much do whatever they want, and they can dominate the same old Arabs and Turks and Iranians that they've always dominated. Wrong. The region has changed, and it's enraged.
In Washington, of course, the argument is that it's in our strategic interest to assist Israel in this massive military way. It's in our strategic interest to do all of that. John Mearsheimer, in his book, The Israel Lobby, argues, greatly researched, that it's absolutely not in our American interest to do anything. Every time we bomb a Middle Eastern country, it comes back to bite us in the ass. 2 days ago, President Biden said at a public event, he was asked about whether or not Iran would attack us and be involved in this. And he said, I've delivered a clear message to Iran. They're not going to do anything. And 24 hours, 48 hours later, we see this. So who's running the show here? I mean, it seems to me that Biden is out to lunch. He's a puppet. He's not running anything.
Well, I think Mr. Netanyahu is ultimately in charge. And remember, he's an extraordinarily intelligent
Small
man.
hats are in charge.
I think he's a bit deranged when it comes to the future of his own country and the region. But he's in charge, and his agents on the Hill are in charge. And who are these? I mean, Lindsey Graham, it's bombs away. Let's flatten Yemen, and then let's fly on to Iran and flatten Iran. There are problems with all of these things because Iran is a far stronger, more capable, and technologically sophisticated state today than it was 30 or 40 years ago. The same thing is true for Turkey. The same thing is true for the Arab states. There is a reportedly some sort of firefight that's gone on along the border between Gaza and Egypt, between Egyptian troops and Israelis. I don't know what this means. I don't know what will happen, but the whole region is on tenterhooks. It's ready to explode. And the people in charge in many of these countries like Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, Jordan, Egypt, they don't want a war. Of course they don't want a war. But if they don't act decisively against the Israelis, their populations will remove them. That's where we're headed. We're going to start to see governments tumble because this is a regional matter, as you pointed out at the beginning. You can't say the things and then do the things that they've done without precipitating this hostility and this response. And Iran, of course, knows we've been talking about attacking them for years. So this was a message that said, don't do it. If you do it, we're prepared. We will fight, and it will be devastating. And by the way, has anybody thought about the consequences for the oil and gas industry and the distribution of energy coming out of the region? Its impact on the whole, globe? I haven't heard any. Do people understand that this will disrupt supply chains? That this could tank economies? And then there sit the Chinese, who absolutely want nothing to do with a war with anybody under any circumstances. And they are acutely dependent not only on the oil and gas coming out of the Persian Gulf, but on food from West Africa. What are they going to do? I think the Chinese will reluctantly join with the Russians, and they will back whomever we attack, and ultimately probably will be drawn in some fashion. So then I worry about the nuclear dimension, which a lot of people sort of dismiss out of hand. But I'm not worried about us. I'm worried about the Israelis and their readiness to use that. And that's a fear in the region. And that fear precipitates what? The development or the acquisition of nuclear capabilities by others, the Turks, the Iranians, potentially even the Saudis. So, excuse me, this thing is out of control. We have no strategy. We haven't defined our interests. And we have always been in a position to pick up the phone and call and say, stop. If you don't stop, we'll end all supplies to you immediately and withdraw all of our forces. That's not going to happen because Mr. Netanyahu really is in charge.
Oh, you're absolutely right about that. Spot on as always. The man who predicted it, Colonel Douglas McGregor. Thank you as always for
in New Hampshire. What will happen with Ron DeSantis? We don't know. Now, I certainly think the Democrats aren't too concerned about what happens with Joe Biden because Nikki Haley is their candidate. And it seems like Vivek Ramaswamy was right. The play the Democrats are making is to get Nikki Haley to win in the primaries in particularly blue areas, and then she can be the Republican nominee. And if it's Nikki Haley versus Joe Biden, you basically got uniparty v. uniparty, and it's back to the old establishment game. If Nikki Haley is elected, we will get World War III, in my opinion. Or, it's a little hyperbolic. We will be strongly moving in that direction. To be fair, however, based on the news we're getting this morning, it may already be the case. We have a major story from Bloomberg. Iran strikes militants in Pakistan as regional tensions soar. And Pakistan is saying that they have a right to retaliate. So now Iran has engaged in military strikes in Syria, Iraq, and Pakistan, while supplying weapons to the Houthi rebels in the Red Sea, shutting down shipping for energy, threatening the European economy, and of course, the American economy. And by all means, you can talk about American foreign policy, who's at fault. But either way, for those of us that are not sitting here trying to get into debate over the actions of the United States and these foreign countries, just know war is on the horizon. It is escalating. It is getting serious. And this will dramatically affect your ability to live. And of course, we may not get to an election this year in the way we think. We have the story from Newsweek. Putin ally says World War III will definitely begin soon in the Middle East. I don't know that he's wrong. Shell apparently is shutting down shipping through the Red Sea, which means energy costs and shipping costs are going to skyrocket. The cost of goods coming into the Mediterranean, it's going to skyrocket because the Houthi rebels keep firing missiles at cargo ships and they're shutting it down. Why are they doing it? Because of Israel and Gaza. And for this, your prices will go up. And as we debate what's going to happen in our Republican primary and who's going to win, something else might happen. I don't know that something like this results in a Joe Biden presidency. In fact, this could actually lead to a Donald Trump landslide. Take that clip and run it a year from now. I don't know that it will, but I'm saying in the event that we actually are pushed into World War III, I do not see an argument being made for Joe Biden, nor Nikki Haley. Nikki Haley may come out and say, I warned all of you when I was on that debate stage that Vladimir Putin was going to start World War III. Well, Donald Trump is going to be the guy who says there was no war under my presidency. Vote for me, and we will put an end to it. The challenge then becomes, how do you, as the deep state, as the U.S. imperial mechanism, ensure that if Donald Trump wins, you get your war? Well, these vile and disgusting scumbags will likely start it before Trump can even assume office. Because then, while they wanted the war in Ukraine with Russia, this was all 2014 under Obama, Donald Trump gets elected and it all subsides. They were probably fuming, saying, we just want to blow up more kids, but they weren't able to. And so, how do you ensure that you, as the deep state, the intelligence agencies, get to blow up as many children and American citizens as possible? Well, it's quite simple. Start the war and force Donald Trump to end it. Because I tell you this, if there is an attack on U.S. targets and Donald Trump is running, we know who Donald Trump is. He will say, I will not stand for this. The United States will retaliate and defend itself. Now, to be fair, when there was I believe a drone got taken down by Iran. I can't remember. It's been a long time since this story. Donald Trump ordered a retaliatory strike and then canceled it at the last minute, saying it's not worth taking the lives of all these individuals over the equipment that we lost or something like that. Perhaps if Iran does expand their conflict and the Red Sea gets just totally shut out, which is basically at right now, if a U.S. target is hit, and a U.S. cargo ship was already hit, Trump might say, as much as we want blood, retaliation, revenge, understand expanding this war will take its toll on you, the American citizen, taxpayer, and voter. And so the best thing we can do is negotiate peace. And perhaps Donald Trump is the best person to do.
Like I say, I'm just warning y'all and telling y'all, because I got to keep it real. I told you the Zionists, the small hats, they have Biden and Trump by the balls. Yes, Trump didn't want war. He fought them on war. They tried to make him go to war with Iran before, and he took the lesser of two evils. He was wrong. The assassination of General Suleiman, that was wrong. The ISIS slayer. But they got charges on him now. All of them, they phony, but that's not how it worked. That trumped up charges, it don't matter. And Trump understands this. They're going after his sons and everything. The Zionists want Iran destroyed, Syria destroyed, that Middle East under their control more than anything. And right now they have both. So I don't know what Trump play gonna be. He has been very wise to stay out of it. He have not came out and talked reckless about destroying, wiping out Gaza and Hamas and kill them all. And he has said Israel got the right to defend themselves. The terrorists are bad, but he keeps saying it would have been no war if I would have been there. He know what he's doing. It very politically astute, but they got them charges on him and Biden, and who knows how this shit gonna go.
To do that, because
as far as the
that's
war,
what we got under his presidency.
They run our country politically.
It was not all perfect. There were drone strikes, a lot of them.
The congressional black
missile strikes in Syria,
especially the congressional black coons. They have shown a weakness like I have never dreamed that they would show. They are liars and bigots and hypocrites, and they should not ever be allowed to come into our communities and say one word about anything to deal with Dr. King or anything happening in the 60s, all that shit. We don't know they did nothing. We can't believe nothing they say no more. Why? Because we see what they're doing. I don't want to hear what you say happened in the 60s because I see your work. I don't want to hear no nigga tell me he was no killer and then with some business going on right now, he don't want to do nothing. Come on, boy, I don't believe you. So they know my energy in 2024 against them is serious. That's serious goddamn business. I don't want to hear none of that ambulance chasing about Black Lives Matter from the Congressional Black Coon because that's a hustle. They don't give a damn about us.
These were mistakes. But Trump,
kissing
no
your goddamn ass.
The timeline for withdrawal from Afghanistan, which Joe Biden screwed up. And I think our best chance for peace will be Donald Trump. Maybe a Ramaswamy vice president. But let me show you what this Putin ally has to say. World War III, of course, keeps bubbling up in the media. And we've been talking about this quite a bit. Understand this. Many people say, Tim, it is too hyperbolic. World War III. Oh, come on. I've had people come on Timcast IRL and they say, there's not going to be World War III. Nuclear bombs flying everywhere. I was like, whoa, who's talking about nuclear bombs flying anywhere? No. This is what people think. When I say World War III, I get these people who are like, you really think nukes are going to go flying? And it's just like, what? When did I say that? Go ahead and make your assumptions, man. World War III simply means there will be war all over the world involving allies and various factions. Doesn't mean people are going to fire ICBMs at each other, though that's a possibility. What we're seeing right now with the Middle East, with China, Venezuela, we've got war bubbling up in basically every region. Almost every region. I mean, to be fair, there's certain areas, South America near, Argentina, Chile. Hey, there's no big war down there, right? But we do have Venezuela and Guyana. We have Eastern Europe. Germany released leaked documents suggest they're preparing for war. Of course, they always say it like, well, Russia's going to engage in World War III, so we better prepare. Yeah, you're preparing for war with Russia. And so is Sweden. They think it's going to escalate to that point. Russia, of course, will align with China. China will make its moves for Taiwan. And this is where we're at. And it may bubble up with conflict in Iran. Of course, the U.S. has wanted to invade Iran for a long time. And it probably has a lot to do with the Red Sea. Among other things, oil, energy, etc. Newsweek reports Margarita Simonyan, editor-in-chief of the Russian state-owned RT, predicted on Monday that World War III will definitely break out in the Middle East. In a series of posts to X, formerly Twitter, she said, Simonian, is that how you pronounce it? Simonian, who the U.S. Department deems a Kremlin propagandist, raised questions about when world powers, including the U.S., would spark a major conflict. And now the Third World War. Whether a world war will break out now or a little later depends on whether Washington believes that it will be useful to it now before the elections or vice versa. Judging by the choral silence of the American media, they're still thinking. I agree. I completely agree with this. Take a look at this document, for this news report from WION. Putin planning World War III? Leaked documents from German MOD reveal NATO's worst nightmare. Certainly, this conversation is bubbling up. But this morning, when I come in to talk about the news, what do I see? Donald Trump versus Ron DeSantis versus Nikki Haley and nothing else. I mean, the primary was a couple days ago, and fair point, there are arguments to be made about what we do in the next week. This is big news here. But the big news, in my opinion, from last night, Iran strikes militants in Pakistan as regional tensions soar.
Big news. And
I started thinking to myself, why is this not front page headline in the mouths of every single pundit? Why is this not the story? Do we have a map? This is nuts. The U.S. has been looking for its casus belli with Iran for a long time, and now we have Iran striking Pakistan. Not to mention almost striking a U.S. consulate in this past week.
Yeah, because the terrorists is always near wherever the U.S. bases and consulates at, you can find terrorists there. And then the U.S. said they killed bin Laden in Pakistan. Hey, it happened to be some terrorists in Pakistan. The U.S. set a precedent. If the U.S. can kill terrorists that's hiding out in Pakistan, Iran say so can we.
And of course, it's in the news, but I'm wondering why it's not the most talked about thing imaginable. And I think, maybe this Kremlin propagandist, as they say, is right. The deep state is not quite sure whether or not to launch retaliation and expand this into the American public just yet. And what I mean is, I'm not saying they have definitive absolute control over whether or not we will discuss a certain story or otherwise. I certainly think that they can push. The U.S. interests can absolutely make this a story a talking point by having Joe Biden come out and say it. The news reports will then all reflect what Biden is saying and talking about. They could. Why aren't they? Maybe they will later. But this was last night. Why hasn't Joe Biden come out and said Iran has made this? Because they don't know just yet how to play this. I think the risk we face right now is the move they will make in terms of foreign war, absolutely, is to force a war that Donald Trump must answer if he wins. The idea being, if we can't have it, no one can. And the deep state, of course, the intelligence agencies, the uniparty, whatever you want to call it, their attitude is going to be, if you really want to take over, we will cause you such tremendous crises and problems, you will regret it. Now, I'm not saying it's the U.S.'s fault for all the war that's happening. I'm saying the U.S. intelligence forces will hyper-focus on and escalate the conflict so that Trump is completely overwhelmed and can do only what they demand he does. Fall in line because war is at your doorstep. I don't know that Trump is that guy. And I don't know that Nikki Haley is going to be able to actually convince anyone to vote for her if war is actually escalating to this point. Bloomberg reports Iran conducted a missile strike on a militant group in Pakistan, sparking a diplomatic crisis between the neighboring countries at a time of rising regional tensions. Regional? Let's talk about global tensions. Pakistan said it's recalling an ambassador to Iran and barring Tehran's envoy from re-entering the country over the unprovoked and blatant breach of its sovereignty.
Pakistan could harbor terror.
The attack marks a sharp escalation of Iran's campaign against Jaish al-Adl, a separatist group based in Pakistan.
Iran is flexing its muscle, showing the U.S. and showing Pakistan they don't give a damn about them nuclear weapons. You can't use them in no war. Iran will kick their ass. Ain't no more hiding out the CIA and Mossad terrorists and all that nonsense not finna happen. And they're humiliating the U.S. The U.S. can come out and say whatever they want. Iran, through talking, talk is cheap. They are reacting and humiliating Joe Biden. Because Joe Biden talking to Iran, they need to finish their business they got with the Houthi rebels. But while they're dealing with the Houthi rebels, Israel is getting embarrassed in Gaza. But while Israel getting embarrassed in Gaza, Zelensky is on the ropes in Ukraine. This is the end of NATO and the imperialists. But that's a very dangerous time. These people don't want to submit. These people don't want to say, okay, you got us. Hell no. And that we don't know what the next move is. But war is on the horizon. Everywhere. In Africa, Putin helped them put out the French. You think the French just gonna go quietly into the night? Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso, they stopped selling European countries resources. They haven't done that in hundreds of years. You not we'll sell you cheap. we'll sell it to you for the proper price. You can't even buy any of our stuff anymore. Yeah.
Pakistan. Iran's Tasnim news agency said 2 bases belonging to the militants in Balochistan province were destroyed late on Tuesday with missiles and drones. Jaish is, Jaish, I would pronounce it, a Sunni group that operates along predominantly Shiite Iran's porous border. Oh, I love this. Just real quick. I have a curse filter. We try to keep it family friendly. And Shiite has been censored by the, that's funny. Iran's porous border with nuclear-armed Pakistan. It's launched multiple attacks on Iranian security forces. Most recently, a December assault on a police station that killed 11 people. Iran and the U.S. both considered a terror group. The strike came as tensions rippled through the Middle East over the war between Israel and Iran-backed Hamas, which has been raging in Gaza for more than 100 days. We get it, and here we are. Red Sea crisis, a risk for EU economy, energy supply, and prices. The Wall Street Journal reports Shell suspends Red Sea shipments amid fears of more Houthi attacks. We'll have to see whether this becomes a longer-standing issue. CEO Wael Sawan told the Wall Street Journal in Davos. This is my question, because I don't know. If these shipments are suspended and the European economy takes a hit, the U.S. economy takes a hit, is that a play against Joe Biden or against Donald Trump? I honestly can only see this benefiting Donald Trump. Biden, as president, will be dealing with international conflict for which he will be blamed. Look at Afghanistan. Or is the play that wartime presidents tend not to lose? Yeah, you take a look at George W. Bush and his approval rating after 9/11 skyrockets, even though people hated the guy beforehand. It's nuts, isn't it? The idea is typically that when war breaks out, wartime presidents see tremendous support because people are scared to vote for someone else at a time of conflict when you need someone to see it through. But I don't know if that's going to play out this way. I mean, Joe Biden as president during a war terrifies me. If it was Donald Trump and war happened, okay, I get it. You know, but I'm maybe that's just me. I'm not the kind of person to be like George W. Bush would remain president because there's a war going on. I'm like, nah. Although, you know, in 2004, I wasn't in favor of anybody. I don't know what was going on. I was like, whatever. I remember watching these debates and just being like, yo, I literally don't care about these people. I don't know if there even is a play. Maybe the reality is just war is coming and there's nothing we can do about it. China wants Taiwan. Iran is upset over Israel. The Houthis are striking trade routes. Europe won't stand for it. Russia does not want NATO expansion on its borders. Would Russia really attack Baltic states?
States appears to have maintained a neutral stance regarding the use of force in response to the recent attacks by the Houthis in the Red Sea. Nevertheless, actions from the Houthis may have provoked retaliatory measures from the United States. Has President Biden fallen into the trap of the Houthis? Or the U.S. has had this action plan all along? Let us get right into it. The United States and the British militaries collaborated in a substantial retaliatory effort against the Iranian-backed Houthi forces in Yemen. This operation involved targeted airstrikes on over a dozen sites known to be utilized by the Houthis. The military action, executed through the deployment of Tomahawk missiles launched from warships and submarines, along with precision strikes from fighter jets, aimed to significantly disrupt Houthi capabilities and infrastructure. The U.S. Air Force's Middle East Command has provided details about the extensive military operation carried out in Yemen. The strike targeted more than 60 specific locations across 16 sites within the country. The selected targets included a range of critical assets utilized by the Iranian-backed Houthi forces. Among the targeted infrastructure were command and control nodes, which were essential for coordinating military operations, and munitions depots, where weapons and ammunition are stored. Additionally, the strikes aimed at disrupting the Houthi capabilities by targeting launching systems, which are likely associated with missile launch platforms and production facilities, indicating a strategic effort to impede the manufacturing and assembly of weaponry. The United States appears to be deeply engaged in the conflict involving the Houthis in the Red Sea. President Joe Biden emphasized that the recent strikes carried out by the U.S. and its allies in Yemen were intended to convey a clear message that the persistent attacks by the Iranian-backed Houthi militant group in the Red Sea region would not be tolerated. The president articulated that the military action was not taken lightly, but was a calculated response after exhausting diplomatic negotiations and careful deliberation. Further, President Biden, in a formal statement, declared that the recent military strikes were a direct and necessary response to the unprecedented series of Houthi attacks on international maritime vessels in the Red Sea. Highlighting a concerning escalation, he specifically mentioned the use of anti-ship ballistic missiles, a first in history. The president expressed grave concern over these actions, emphasizing the threat they pose to both U.S. personnel and civilian mariners, as well as the broader implications for international trade. The recent strikes represent the initial military response from the United States against an ongoing series of drone and missile attacks on commercial ships, a campaign that has persisted since the commencement of the Israel-Hamas war. This coordinated military action occurred just 1 week after the White House, along with several partner nations, issued a final warning to the Houthis, urging them to cease these attacks. Moving on, in a significant escalation of hostilities, Houthi rebels launched their most extensive barrage to date, comprising drones and missiles targeting shipping in the Red Sea. In response, U.S. and British ships, along with American fighter jets, actively engaged in countering the threat, successfully intercepting and neutralizing 18 drones, 2 cruise missiles, and an anti-ship missile. This demonstrated a coordinated effort to protect maritime assets in the face of a heightened and sophisticated assault. Remarkably, just 2 days later, the Houthi rebels fired an anti-ship ballistic missile into the Gulf of Aden. Fortunately, despite being detected by a commercial ship, the missile did not make contact with its target. In a distinct announcement, UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak confirmed that the Royal Air Force had executed precise and deliberate strikes against military facilities utilized by the Houthi rebels. This action was taken in response to the escalating conflict and demonstrated the United Kingdom's commitment to actively addressing the threat posed by the Houthi forces. The targeted strikes were aimed at disrupting key military infrastructure, further emphasizing the coordinated approach with the United States in responding to the complex situation in the region. Highlighting the perilous nature of the attacks conducted by the militants on shipping, UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak emphasized the imperative for a robust response, stating, "This cannot stand." He went on to clarify that the United Kingdom, in collaboration with the United States and with non-operational support from the Netherlands, Canada, and Bahrain, undertook limited, necessary, and proportionate actions in self-defense. The objective was to target specific locations associated with the Houthi attacks on shipping, to degrade Houthi military capabilities and secure global shipping routes. In a unified stance, the governments of Australia, Bahrain, Canada, Denmark, Germany, Netherlands, New Zealand, South Korea, the United States, and the United Kingdom jointly issued a statement. This collective declaration emphasized their shared commitment to de-escalating tensions and reinstating stability in the Red Sea. While expressing a strong preference for peaceful resolution, the Allies made it clear that they stand ready to defend lives and safeguard commerce in the crucial waterway. However, the Houthis claim that their attacks aim to halt Israel's conflict with Hamas in the Gaza Strip. Interestingly, the targets of their assaults increasingly lack a direct connection to Israel and pose a threat to a vital trade route linking Asia and the Middle East with Europe. In the midst of these developments, the United Nations Security Council, on Wednesday, adopted a resolution demanding an immediate cessation of attacks by the Houthis. Implicitly condemning Iran as a supplier of weapons to the group, the resolution received approval with a vote of 11-0, while 4 nations, Russia, China, Algeria, and Mozambique, opted for abstention. The effects of the conflicts on the Red Sea are dire. The transit route spanning the Red Sea, from the Suez Canal to the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, constitutes a vital shipping lane crucial for global commerce. Approximately 12% of the world's trade typically traverses this waterway that acts as a significant conduit separating Africa, and the Arabian Peninsula. The commodities transported through this route encompass a wide spectrum, including essential resources such as oil and natural gas, as well as agricultural products like grain. Moreover, the corridor facilitates the transportation of diverse goods, ranging from consumer items like toys to sophisticated electronics. Given its pivotal role, any disruptions or threats to the security of this passage have far-reaching implications for the global economy and trade networks. In reaction to the escalating attacks in the region, the United States initiated a comprehensive maritime security mission named Operation Prosperity Guardian. This operation aims to enhance security in critical maritime areas, including the Red Sea, Bab el-Mandeb Strait, and the Gulf of Aden. Impressively, approximately 22 countries are actively participating in this multinational effort. As part of Operation Prosperity Guardian, U.S. warships, along with vessels from other participating nations, are regularly patrolling the narrow strait, navigating back and forth. The primary objectives are to provide protective escorts for ships transiting the area and to serve as a deterrent against potential attacks. Additionally, the coalition has significantly increased airborne surveillance activities, employing advanced technologies to monitor and respond effectively to any emerging threats in the region. In latest developments, a notable trend has emerged in response to the heightened security concerns in the Red Sea, with at least 9 ships adjusting their declared destinations as they approach or traverse the region. These alterations involve the conspicuous declaration that their crew is Chinese or all Chinese on their automatic identification system, a global tracker mandated by the International Maritime Convention. The ship's proactive move to disclose the nationality and makeup of its crews is reflected in this strategic movement, which may have been made in reaction to the region's complicated geopolitical dynamics. This move is probably motivated by the hope that by highlighting their ties to China, they will be seen as supporting the causes of the Houthi rebels, who have been stepping up their attacks in the Red Sea since November, or Palestinians in Gaza. If this perception holds true, it aligns with a broader narrative influenced by a nationalist agenda from Beijing. There is a concerted effort to project China as a global force that maintains a neutral stance in international conflicts, while fostering positive relations with economically disadvantaged nations. Vessels navigating the Red Sea are demonstrating innovative strategies for survival. Beyond the tactic of displaying Chinese banners, some ships have chosen to exhibit affiliations with Russia as part of their efforts to adapt to the challenging security environment. In the same region, a minimum of 2 ships asserted their affiliation with Russia, a nation that openly condemned the airstrikes targeting the Houthis. Certain ships are choosing to deactivate their AIS trackers as they enter the region, aiming to navigate discreetly past both the Houthis and potential pirate threats. However, experts in the maritime industry caution that this strategy may complicate rescue efforts by Western warships patrolling the area if these vessels go dark and become targets of an attack. In a previous directive, Mohammed Ali al-Houthi, a prominent leader of the Houthi organization, advised commercial ships to indicate on their AIS that they have no connection with Israel if they wish to reduce the likelihood of being singled out in attacks. The recent surge in Houthi attacks has had far-reaching consequences on the global trade landscape, causing substantial disruptions and inflating costs. As a response to the heightened security risks, major transport companies have taken the precautionary measure of suspending shipping lanes through the Red Sea. This shift in maritime routes has particularly impacted the Suez Canal, a vital waterway that serves as a key conduit for international trade. With an estimated 90% of container ships that would typically navigate through the Suez Canal now opting for alternative routes, the circumvention involves taking the longer journey around the southern tip of Africa. This diversion not only extends the duration of voyages, but also incurs additional fuel costs, impacting the efficiency and economics of global shipping operations.
as Houthis continue their blockade against international shipping in the Red Sea, as Western forces are escalating in defense of international commerce. Last week, the Biden administration, alongside its European allies, launched a series of missile strikes on targets in Yemen in what they say is an effort to resolve the situation. However, on Monday, rebels launched an anti-ship ballistic missile, or several missiles, at Gibraltar Eagle, a U.S.-owned and operated container vessel, though there were no injuries and no significant damage. UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak disconnected the Houthi issue with the Israel/Palestine conflict and said military action had to be taken against the Houthis or else risk the collapse of the rules-based order. Let's watch.
Mr. Speaker, we shouldn't fall for their malign narrative that this is about Israel and Gaza. They target ships from around the world. We continue to work towards a sustainable ceasefire in Gaza and to get more aid to civilians. We also continue to support a negotiated settlement in Yemen's civil war.
Lies. No, you don't.
But I want to be very clear that this action is completely unrelated to those issues. It is a direct response to the Houthis' attacks on international shipping. And we should also recognize the risks of inaction. It would weaken international security and the rule of law, further damage freedom of navigation in the global economy, and send a dangerous message that British vessels and British interests are fair game.
While the West is convinced that bombing the rebels into submission is the best way to reopen the Red Sea shipping lanes, our next guest disagrees. Dr. Trita Parsi wrote a new piece for Time arguing that there's a simple reason why U.S. strikes against the Houthis won't achieve their objective of reopening the Red Sea lanes. The Houthis don't have to succeed in striking additional commercial vessels. All that they need to do is try, because that's enough to sustain a de facto shipping blockade. Western commercial vessels will simply not risk moving their ships through those waters, not in spite of President Joe Biden's military strikes, but because of them. Here to discuss further is Dr. Trita Parsi. Welcome back to Rising.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, thanks for joining us. So they have fired on our ships. I mean, what is the argument for not, for not deploying the full might of the U.S. military to crush people who are attacking us and blocking international trade?
Well, certainly self-defense can be warranted, but we have to ask ourselves, what is the objective here? If the objective is to make sure that we are not under attack and that the shipping lanes remain open, the reality is that starting a war or this game of deterrence is not likely to succeed. It may feel right. It certainly will make a lot of people in Washington happy. But if the question is, we actually want to achieve the objective that we're setting out, which is to make sure that our ships are not attacked and that the shipping lanes are open, then this is not the likely path to success. In fact, what the British Prime Minister is saying is just patently false. The Houthis have made it quite clear that they will stop these attacks if a ceasefire is established in Gaza, meaning that the Israelis stop slaughtering people in Gaza. Now, we should not take that at face value, but we should take note that when there was a ceasefire, the attacks on the ships reduced significantly. Only one that can actually be identified to.
First of all, if it wasn't a genocidal war going on, the Houthi rebels would not be attacking. They're holding their word. If you stop the war in Palestine, we will not block the Red Sea. The U.S. and Britain and NATO and the great white Western world can't do nothing about this. And as much as they get sucked into this Middle East war, it's going to be more painful for them and their economy. But the thing about that is bankers like the Rothschilds and those other families you don't know, they love this. They make money through this. It's called controlled chaos. People make money doing chaotic situations. They want
the Houthis,
but they need bodies.
There seems to be a likelihood of success here. And the point is, we have to first exhaust all non-violent options to be able to achieve the objective of making sure that the ships are safe and the sea lanes are open before going towards military action. Biden has not done that because by his own admission, he did not raise the ceasefire in his last call with Netanyahu. He has vetoed 2 UN resolutions calling for pauses. And on top of that, he has also said publicly that he believes that a ceasefire is impossible. So the path towards actually effectively protect the ships and keeping the sea lanes open is the path that he seems to be least inclined to pursue. And now we're risking a major war. And the question then is, how are we making ourselves safer by actually walking into a larger regional war? Mindful of the fact that the last wars we have had in the Middle East have been absolutely disastrous for the United States and for the region as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, the comparison that's been made is that we're getting this military escalation that many people are arguing is unconstitutional. Biden did not get congressional permission before he started this bombing campaign in order to defend a shipping route that largely implicates ships that are not, they're not U.S. military vessels. That's not the implication here. And ships that were allowed to pass as long as they weren't going to Israel. This was a blockade of Israel and the humanitarian defense. Arguably, that's the argument that the Yemenis are making of Palestine, and people are making comparisons to other kinds of humanitarian blockades and efforts to give humanitarian aid. In particular, this Turkish ship that attempted to bring humanitarian aid very famously to Gaza some years ago that was bombed by Israel. An American was killed, and certainly there was no discourse around the idea of America bombing Israel in defense. So I wonder if you can give us a picture of what you see as the real problem here in terms of the potential for escalating into a broader regional conflict.
Well, I mean, the bottom line problem is that the Biden administration is sacrificing almost everything, including tremendously important U.S. interests, to allow Israel to continue the slaughter in Gaza. And the question we have to ask ourselves, what is it in Israel's continued bombardment of Gaza that is so important for the United States and our interest that it warrants the risks that the administration is now accepting? Compare ourselves to where we are today to 3 months ago. Look at how much closer we are to a larger regional war. And for what? So that the Israelis can continue to bombard Gaza and slaughter people there, despite the fact that their own press increasingly is writing that they're failing?
No, because this is about imperialism, colonialism, white supremacy. They cannot admit defeat to the Palestinian Jihad. They cannot admit defeat to the Africans, France getting kicked out. They cannot defeat to the Russian people. They don't want to admit defeat, but they've been defeated. So they don't want to admit defeat like every other, all the rest of the empires. They're gonna fall without admitting it. That's why it's gonna be chaotic for civilization. Who knows what's gonna happen? Because these people never gonna admit they've been defeated.
And that they're not succeeding in taking out Hamas. And the former Israeli prime minister himself put it quite bluntly in the pages of Haaretz, saying that the chances of defeating Hamas militarily in the manner that Netanyahu set out is actually at nil. So why are we doing this? Why are we risking a war that would drag the U.S. Into it, that will have more American body bags coming home for the region, simply in order to allow the Israelis to continue to bombard Gaza, not achieving the objectives that they themselves have set up?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of wisdom in that, and I want us to be less involved in the Middle East, and certainly not, our wars there going so disastrously in the past, which is why I, have absolutely support cutting off aid independent of to Israel, independent of the situation there. But the issue with the Houthis, of course, is they have attacked us. Now, obviously, under the Constitution, does not give the executive, and should not. In fact, we've given too much power to the executive to wage a unilateral war without authority from Congress. But my understanding is defensively, the president can respond, can order retaliatory defensive action in a limited capacity, not for an unlimited period of time before Congress can intervene. And maybe there's a debate over the limits of that or the extent to that. Can you talk about this aspect of our battle now with these Yemeni rebels?
Well, I think first of all, if my understanding is correct, the attacks on shipping by the Houthis prior to the U.S. attack was actually not American ships. So we intervened in order to keep the sea lanes open, not because our own ships have been attacked. The attack that came against the American ship happened, if I'm not correct.
Revolutionary salute to our brother Young Grizzly for the donation to the war chest. Revolution is a way of life. Appreciate the donation, brother. Salute.
Mistaken a day or two ago after the U.S. started striking the Houthis. Now, let's take your argument, because I think there's validity to it. After there has been an attack, there is a legitimacy for striking and defending. That has now already happened. There's been 2 rounds of strikes by the United States. It's not going to achieve the larger objective, but it may be able to say, okay, we struck back.
Now, first of all, the last 5 American presidents have been bombing Yemen. Yemen starts shooting back at our ships and stuff. Oh, we got to defend ourselves. That's Yemen defending their self. You see, what he's talking about is still imperialism because he likes to go on TV. You've been attacking Yemen for decades. Finally, they done rose up to give you a gut punch. Now we're talking about we got to defend ourselves. What are you talking about? That's imperialism. Stop fucking with people and you might be all right.
What now then? Why not take a step back and actually pursue the thing that is more likely to succeed, which is to have a ceasefire, which has also several other very positive side effects. First of all, it will stop the attacks by the Iraqi militias against the United States. It will pacify the Israeli-Lebanese border. It will reduce the risk of a broader war that we absolutely do not need. It will help release the Israeli hostages held by Hamas, because the only time they have been released is through a ceasefire. And perhaps most importantly, it will end what the South Africans in the International Criminal Court or a Court of Justice are calling a genocide. Yet we're not pursuing that option, and instead we're incrementally getting closer and closer to a larger conflict because the incremental steps appear justified because what the other side did. That's the fallacy we should not fall for. We should think about how do we actually achieve our strategic objectives rather than just tactically reacting to what the other side is doing.
Dr. Trita Parsi, thank you so much for joining us today.
Good morning and welcome to Counterpoints. How you doing, Emily?
I'm good. Cold, but good.
So we've got the world on the cusp of World War III, and we've got big news out of all 3 branches of the federal government today. I also did an pre-interview yesterday with Guillaume Long, a former foreign minister of Ecuador, that will play either later today or later this week. But we're not going to be able to talk at length about the Supreme Court today, which is hearing a case that could upend basically everything. So tell us a little bit about that before we get into the rest.
So Chevron deference is essentially what's on the table at the Supreme Court oral arguments.
That means
today.
basically the ability of the administrative state to administer the state.
Right. Yeah. So the Supreme.
So that's where we are at this point with that one.
Can't wait.
Like invasion of Yemen and occupation of Sana'a in order to stop attacks on the Red Sea is obviously not in the cards.
No, nobody's even talking about it.
And so if all the Houthis need is access to a couple of missiles and a couple of drones to continue to threaten shipping, no amount of bombing is going to stop that. In fact, it's absurd. Like the more, we could put up A3 real quickly, just jump to this one, and then we'll go back to A2. So Shell announced that it is shockingly suspending Red Sea shipments amid a war. So we are escalating a war, launching regular airstrikes, and expecting that somehow, as a result of that, shipping companies are going to be like, "Oh, cool, we're good now." Yeah. As long as like the war is hotter and wider, then yeah, we'll send our ships through here.
Right.
When these shipping companies, like, they actually don't care that much. Like if they have to go around the Horn of South Africa, they'll charge more. The people who get charged more on the other end are the ones that are going to start complaining. And also, obviously, all of the Israeli shipping companies in the ports that are now, mostly idling and sitting empty. It's grinding significant elements of the Israeli economy to a halt as a result of this.
I would say the journal notes around 12% of total global seaborne oil trade goes through the Red Sea.
Right. So then that is eventually going to drive up prices, and that's what the U.S. is responding to, which is why the U.S. called its operation Prosperity Guardian.
Prosperity Guardian, yeah.
They then subsequently said that they didn't need congressional authorization for airstrikes on Yemen because they were defensive in action. But defensive against what? It's defensive of the global economy, not of the United States. And you also can't. I've heard people say, "Well, they attacked one of the ships." Well, you're not allowed to introduce a ship into hostilities and then have that ship receive hostile fire and then say, okay, well, now we have to defend ourselves. Like, that's not an end run around Article 1 of the Constitution, which gives Congress the authority to declare war.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely not. Let's put A2 back up on the screen here. What you're going to see, Ryan, can you tell us actually a little bit about this? This is the response actually from the Houthis. And if you're listening to this podcast, what you're seeing is a literal Red Sea, an animation of a literal Red Sea, and ships burning in the sea and over sunset. You're also seeing a Houthi rebel who's gone majorly viral. The meme calls him Tim Houthi Chalamet because it kind of looks like Timothy Chalamet, actually, right? But tell us what we're seeing from propaganda channels here.
So the first thing is the Houthis have been very clear that they want this. Like, they are eager to have the United States launching a handful of airstrikes at them. They want it is because it is useful to them domestically and regionally.
Validating.
Yeah, domestically, since the ceasefire with Saudi Arabia, that means the Yemeni public now has other demands of the government, their de facto government, that the situation improve, and that's kind of for a lot of kind of rebel or revolutionary forces that part of the process is less interesting, like than the actual fighting part. When you are at war with a hated rival, it's much easier to govern domestically. And so you've seen now the Yemeni public rally behind the Houthis in a way they hadn't since, say, the 2015, 2016 era. At the same time, regionally, polls among Palestinians and also around the Middle East are showing that the Houthis are now, like, by far the most popular kind of regional actors. So they have a lot of their own interests. What's new about this, I can't remember this happening in a conflict before, is the way that the Western public is so readily able to identify with the people that are supposed to be the adversaries. You see it certainly in Gaza with all of these kind of Palestinian journalists becoming kind of influencer level celebrities on Instagram and TikTok, and that allows the kind of Western public to identify personally with a lot of with real people who are under attack. Now you've seen the Houthis take this really interesting social media strategy where they're engaging directly with an American audience. Like, they will say, "Death to America," but you're cool. Like, you are not. We do not consider you America. You're American, but the government does not represent your values. And they have been encouraged by a response from an American public that is like, you've had a lot of people saying thank you, Houthis, for like standing up against what Israel is doing in Palestine, and they seem encouraged by that. This one seems to go a little bit off the rails because now you've got this American public just going gaga over this like super hot Houthi sailor. He even responded.
And by the way, I mean, like, all of that is just
see. Look at it. He call it the man hot. You see, this is the problem now. That man don't want you.
And he's objectively hot, right? I mean, he's hot.
You're into Tim Houthi.
Yeah, this guy's hot. Yeah, I mean, there's just no
he's a good-looking
guy.
Yeah, he's a very good-looking guy.
He's a good-looking dude. Now, Newsweek called him. The Newsweek headline was "Hot Houthi Pirate Becomes Online Sensation." God, you're beautiful. I object to the pirate part because they are a de facto government carrying out a government policy. Whether you like the government policy or not, or support it, don't support it, it's not piracy. Like, they're not grabbing ships and like keeping the stuff and selling it.
It's not extra governmental.
Other than the fact that they are not the recognized government yet, but they are the recognized negotiating partner in governmental negotiations with Saudi Arabia, for instance.
It's actually, I haven't ever had to parse the definition of pirate quite like this.
Right,
it's genuinely an interesting question.
This is brand new.
Genuinely interesting question. I mean, but this is incredibly dangerous. I get it. I understand the social media back and forth. And in fact, Ryan, he responded.
Yeah, he said he's on Twitter because a lot of the Houthis are on social media. And he wrote, this is rough Google translation, but he wrote, responding to the Newsweek article, "I did not talk about beauty or anything else, but our issue is Palestine, and this is not the time to talk about beauty. I hope that my message will reach you a free Palestine, and we will ignite it against the Israeli aggression that violates human rights. I was going through the replies to that, and I saw a lot of people saying, "You're so right. Give me a call. Let's talk about that.
Give me a call."
Yeah. Just call me. You're right.
Yeah, DM for segment.
Outrageous that people are objectifying you. Call me.
Yeah. It sort of reminds me of when like a model tries to post a political opinion, and I'm not comparing him to a model because obviously he's a political actor and not a model, but it reminds me of that when people can't get past how hot the person delivering the political message is. That happens to the best of us.
So the United States.
Yeah, we don't have time for the type of nonsense on this show. Goddamn revolution.
All right. So as everybody knows, today is MLK Day. And as everyone would expect, everyone wants to claim MLK today, FBI including worse than the FBI, including the state of Israel. I shit you not.
Oh my God.
I shit you not. This is from the Israeli embassy. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate.
Oh my God.
Only love can do that. Now that's from the man himself. And then they go on to say, today we mark Martin Luther King Jr. Day and remember Dr. King's legacy of peace, tolerance, and equality. I couldn't believe it when this got sent to me. Keaton said this to me. I was like, I say, you are fucking with me, man. You can find Martin Luther King Street in the center of Israel's capital. Oh my God. Hashtag Jerusalem.
Oh my God.
Minutes away from Abu Tor, a mixed Jewish Arab.
Is it one of their worst streets? Like
that's a street with all the potholes on it.
Why is Dr. King's name a curse on streets?
No, that is talk about. I mean, they'll just hide behind anybody, man. Look, we got a street.
Wait,
we got a street. How bad could Israel be?
How long has it been there?
That I don't know. That I don't know. I would imagine.
Russell, we were just sort of talking about this earlier on our stream earlier, and that how the Martin Luther King holiday, we love celebrating his birthday. That's great.
Right.
But the actual holiday has become this sort of cesspool of people co-opting who he is and what his message was. I mean, this has got to be the largest co-opting that I've ever seen of Martin Luther King from the state of Israel.
Disgusting.
But people
in the middle of a genocide.
Right in the middle of a genocide, they have
the congressional black coons is the reason for this type of stuff. Because they should be calling them out, but they not. Because they all backed by the ADL, AIPAC, the Zionists. See? They want Israel is an apartheid regime, and they want to act like they for Dr. King. That's disgusting. They a segregated society, but they want to hijack Dr. King's name and legacy for their own purposes.
The audacity, but you see this a lot in the media class where they love to project. Martin Luther King this, Martin Luther King that. But if Martin Luther King was alive, I always say this, if he was alive, he would be an adversary to them for the things he was advocating for the worker. Worker. And that's what I believe he was murdered, actually. But go ahead.
Well, you know what? Somebody else did the courtesy of pointing this out. What won't be discussed in America today is that in 1967, immediately after the 6-Day War, Martin Luther King said on national TV that Israel would have to leave the territory it had just conquered.
That's genocide.
And that's anti-Semitism. I think this is his quote. I think for the ultimate peace and security of the situation, it will probably be necessary for Israel to give up this conquered territory, because to hold onto it will only exacerbate the tensions and deepen the bitterness of the Arabs. And here we are.
The Hamas? I didn't know MLK was a Hamas. Apparently,
he was a pioneer. He was a founding member of Hamas. It's just amazing to invoke the name of someone, even that aside, somebody who's associated with nonviolent resistance, as you're killing thousands of women and children at a rate even beyond. Children are dying at a rate beyond the rate of the Holocaust. And you have the nerve to invoke Martin Luther King Jr. on this day. And I always point this out whenever they pull this. It's a mixed Arab-Israeli neighborhood. Okay, so let me explain that.
That's not good.
All right. They always use that fig leaf whenever this comes up, that they're an apartheid state. The Arabs they're talking about are some Arabs that managed to hold on through the Nakba, which was the mass expulsion of 750,000 some odd Arabs out of their homes. And their descendants have a form of Israeli citizenship, not a full citizenship. They have a form of citizenship. They use these people as a fig leaf to pretend they're not an apartheid state. But if you are Palestinian, you can't, if you're not one of those people or a descendant of those people, you cannot get Israeli citizenship even by marriage. So this idea, no, it's not an apartheid state because we have Arabs. They have some Arabs that they use to hide behind, like the way they hide behind the Holocaust whenever you call them out, to pretend they're not an apartheid state. Fellas, you want to weigh in?
As the Ethiopian Jews that was forcibly sterilized by the state of Israel, how much they appreciate using the MLK quote. Because there's nothing like Martin Luther King Jr., nothing that represents the energy of Martin Luther King Jr., other than forcibly sterilizing Ethiopian women and telling other immigrants, do not breed with our Jewish women because they don't want to dilute their blood. That's in the spirit of MLK, right, Russell? Very revolutionary.
Yeah, well, that's
and now you guys see.
Yeah, that's a lost letter from the Birmingham jail, right?
Now this is exactly why I hate MLK Day, and this is what I was saying on RBN. I quickly grown to hate MLK Day because I came from sales, so I never got MLK Day off, so it was a useless holiday. And now MLK Day is essentially used as a way for neocons and the most corrupt swamp monsters in our government to rehabilitate their image using someone who was anti-capitalist and anti-war. Fam, we had John McCain who tweeted about MLK back in the day.
Yep.
This is what they do. You have Hakeem Jeffries that's tweeting about MLK Jr. I hate MLK Jr. Day. It serves nothing. We talk about our revolutionary leaders all the time. I don't need a month. I don't need a day. I don't need a holiday. RBN as our channel, and what we need to do as a community is uplift our revolutionary intellectual leaders. Stop following people like Barack Obama. Stop following Jay-Z. Stop following Beyonce. The Black community had their mind poisoned by the pop culture, by worshiping Black politicians as celebrities. We need to go back to our radical revolutionary roots, and that is what RBN is. MLK Day, that is just a day where scumbags like John Lewis used to prop up their record. You know John Lewis, the civil rights activist that created the slave trade in Libya? But he's going to tell you a story about how he met MLK and they were friends, though. The Black class sold out to capitalism. They destroyed Africa. They bombed Africa. They sold out the Black people to real estate development companies and the police state. And then they had the nerve to tweet about MLK. I hate this day. We celebrate his birthday. We celebrate MLK the man like we do every single day. But his holiday is trash. The same way that Juneteenth is about to be trash.
Oh my God!
You had Joy Ann Reid.
I was going to say, but do you still believe in Juneteenth?
Joy Ann Reid doing a Juneteenth panel, and I'm supposed to be excited about that. A millionaire Black panel talking about how we should vote for Joe Biden, celebrate Juneteenth. That's what they do into holidays. The only thing they do is hijack our Black culture, water it down, and turn everyone to a black neoliberals. That's what they do. And RBN, we don't stand for it. That's what we call these people out first and foremost.
Wait, did you guys not know what mattering means? You get holidays.
Mattering.
That will, yeah. Remember the FBI last year? They had the FBI, the ones that spied on him, had a whole Martin Luther King thing on all their. I don't know. It was like around the time.
I mean, look, Israel is going. I mean, you can't make it up. So this article is actually pretty good dealing with some of what you're talking about. Even though he's revered today, MLK was widely disliked by the American public when he was killed. 75% of Americans disapproved of the civil rights leader as he spoke out against the Vietnam War and economic disparity. And that's
especially Joe Biden. Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton, they used to call him Dr. Coon. All of those racist bastards used to call him Dr. Coon. They never called him Dr. King.
Something that they really never talk about.
Why do you guys think that Jimmy Dore show is the only show that invites RBN on? Why do you guys think that is?
Look, because
why do you think that is?
We don't want to put. They don't want to put on a list.
They don't want to visit from the Mossad. But go ahead with what you want.
Yeah, my point being, they're gonna look at MLK now in hindsight. They look at Malcolm X in hindsight. They look at Fred Hampton in hindsight, and they're like, man, these was great revolutionaries. They really stressed the Overton window. They really caused a ruckus. And then black radicals that do that today, that follow in the tradition. Remember, we're Fred Hampton leftists. The people who follow in that tradition are hated today. Or if Fred Hampton Jr. was alive today, they would call him Red, Brown, Alliance. If Malcolm X was alive today, they would call him one of the Hamas agents. And as white America pretends that they look up to these people, the political statements that these people made had them hated. The same reason that RBN is hated, because we take these controversial stances that many people are uncomfortable with, so many people don't invite us on the show. And as the people don't invite us on the show, they then come on and talk about how much they love black radicals and MLK, even though modern black radicals have politics that make them uncomfortable. So I think that applies today with white liberals not only having disdain towards MLK, but they have disdain towards black radical politics. We don't agree with everything, and obviously Jimmy Dore show don't agree with everything that RBN says. But what do they say that the fact that Jimmy Dore show is the only one who is brave enough to air our opinions out?
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
That's to me, and let me speak on that because this is something RBN talks about all the time when people want to bring up this Jimmy Dore derangement syndrome. Is like Jimmy Dore platformed us. Did you, Crystal Ball? Did you on Breaking Points? Jimmy Dore donates to our mutual aid events sometimes. Do you do that? Like it's like a person who's showing us improving solidarity. You want us to exchange that for your rhetoric. Like it's not a trade-off. We want tangible goods, and Jimmy Dore's allyship right now is giving us a tangible return. So that's how we view it, and that's how we're always going to view it.
Well, there's something else I think people don't realize since you brought it up. You know, we don't just talk when you see us. We talk outside of here. And when we have disagreements, we talk about it. Well, you think we never disagree? What do you think? Everybody just goes along? No, man. If there's a disagreement, we all talk about it. With Jimmy, everybody talks. He's not, you know, the impression you get from certain people that, you know, you can't do that. No, you just can't come like an asshole.
Well, as long as just Jimmy is Irish in the conversation, it'll work out.
Well, that's it. You know, you get some Jameson, and no, man. I mean, look, we work out. There's shit we work out that you don't see. All right, so it's not what a lot of those people with the derangement syndrome have. In fact, I mean, look, I'm like freaking Charlie Bucket here. I'm the guy who like won the golden ticket. I was a fan, right? Who's sitting here hosting the Jimmy Dore show.
Yes.
So yeah, man.
That's crazy.
I heard it. Yeah. Jimmy had more to do with red pilling me probably than any other single person I was watching when I was going through that transformation from being a Hillary person to being someone who'd be screaming at Rachel Maddow. Like a lot of Jimmy's content had a lot to do with kind of explaining to me what was going on. And, you know, I can only speak to my personal experience, but I think that's your experience too. Like having actually gotten to know the person for real. A lot of the things that you hear, I don't even understand how you could know him and come to that kind of conclusion. What you hear, the grifting, all that.
I don't
you
think
spend 5 minutes with this guy. If you have any common sense in your brain, you know everything coming out of his mouth is exactly what he believes with absolute conviction.
I don't think people know what grift
that
means.
doesn't mean you got to agree with everything somebody says. But that's something else, man. If you understand this space, the way to grift is you go full Pod Save America, or you go full Daily Wire. That's the way you grift.
Yep.
Doing this, you're risking your channel every day. You think the way to grift is to start getting into these kind of, I'll say it gently,
Are you still talking to Crystal?
health issues, things like that. That's the way to grift. That's the way to grift, to keep poking the bear every day like that.
Who even claimed whose name I would even mention? Do you know what I mean? Like,
I'm not naming any names, but people know what we're talking about since it came up, and I know there are a lot of people in the community who have questions about this, and I'm somebody I'm somebody from that community who's sitting here, and I can tell you it's not what those people say.
Have you not watched him?
And if it was, believe me, man,
it ain't access journalism. That's for damn sure.
Right. That's the way. The way to grift in this space is don't say anything interesting enough to get thrown off YouTube. That's the way to
have politicians on and kiss their ass. The way to grift to have politicians on and give them tongue back interviews. I had Marianne Wilson on our show, and she called me a mansplainer because I pushed her on the Israel-Palestine issue. That's what happens when you're not trying to grift. Well, people who try to grift, they attend Marianne Wilson's wedding, and then they tell you that she's an agent of the working class, even though she's a millionaire white woman who tried to sell people self-help books.
Look, look, man.
She said, "Listen, honey,
give Marianne her due. Give Marianne her due. I think we manifested all this. I just think she would manifest. I wish she would manifest a real campaign. That would be nice.
Right.
If you're into manifesting, why don't you manifest a real campaign? But I'm very glad we've manifested here together. All right, so just getting into this a little bit. According to an early 1968 Harris poll, the man whose half-century of martyrdom we celebrate this week died with a public disapproval rating of nearly 75%, a figure shocking in its own day and still striking even in today's highly polarized political climate. White racial resentment was still a critical factor at that point, but Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s unfavorable numbers were at least 25 points higher in 1968 than in 1963, and his faltering appeal over the final years of his life was also a consequence of appearing to fall behind his times in some respects, even as he was leaping well ahead of them in others.
Okay, what's this? I can't wait. The thing of needing to be of your time, you know, like, oh, I've heard people say outdated comedy, for example. And I'm like, what does that mean? Does that mean you?
This gets into how he started taking up union causes, and that's when he started to have problems.
That's what's out of touch?
A day after
labor.
Exactly. When he started getting it a day after returning home in December 1964 from a tour whose most important stop was Oslo, the Nobel laureate for peace joined a picket line at Atlanta's Scripto pen factory where some 700 workers were striking for better wages for less skilled employees. Though it was a remarkably humble gesture for someone who had received such a lofty affirmation, King's actions that day and his call for a nationwide boycott of Scripto products won him few friends in his hometown's white, staunchly anti-union business community. While still involved in the Scripto affair, King sat for a Playboy interview with Alex Haley, in which he endorsed a massive federal aid program for blacks. Its whopping $50 billion price tag was, he pointed out, less than annual U.S. spending for defense.
That's less than.
Well, now that's less than we send to Ukraine in a month, right?
Their weekly allowance.
Such an expenditure, he argued, would be more than justified in a spectacular decline in school dropouts, family breakups, crime rates, illegitimacy, swollen relief rolls, rioting, and other social evils. Now this is the part that really scared him, and what scared him about Fred Hampton too. Yeah. Many poor whites were in the very same boat with the Negro, he added, and if they could be persuaded to join forces with blacks, they could form a grand alliance and exert massive pressure on the government to get jobs for all. King had made passing allusions to this possibility before, but a straightforward call for an active biracial coalition of have-nots was just as terrifying to white ruling elites, be they on Peachtree Street on Wall Street, as it had been when raised by the populists in the 1890s. Now, that's something that has come up again and again in American history. There have been many junctures where poor whites and poor blacks tried to get together to challenge power. And usually they've used the technique of telling the whites, well, you'll have it a little better if you come with us, and broken up that coalition.
They go to schools they go to all the best schools to learn how to do that specifically. Like I can't remember what it's some Roman treatise on how to divide the populace against themselves. And if you went to a good school, that's what you learned.
Right. Well,
I actually think this is the reason. This is my only point of view. This is the reason why he was actually killed, not because of the racial stuff.
Yeah,
remember,
obviously.
he had already passed all this legislation. So why would they wait till he's already hit his finish line at that time,
right,
to get the legislation passed and then kill him once he starts to organize? This, to me, is what the establishment fears the most. Is white people and black people coming together to form poor whites. I should add, poor whites and poor blacks coming together. We don't want the crazy bourgeoisie that's teaming up with the establishment, but those in the working class coming together, black, white, of all shades, not just black and white, but in particular, it scares them if black people and white people are in a coalition.
Yep.
And maybe Nick can speak to why you believe that is. I've heard you kind of discuss this before, and I love how you discussed it, but why is it specifically black and white that scares them more than like a black and Hispanic, a black Asian, or white and Asian? It's black and white that puts fear in their eyes. Just don't know.
And let's go to our conversations at the post-duopolis show. Remember, Russell, when I explained how I have massive disdain towards identity politics?
Yeah.
People who spend their time pushing the culture war, I view as deeply unserious. Not only are they deeply unserious, they're doing the bidding of the capitalist class.
Right.
That's to answer your question.
Well,
so when people focus on class and they ignore the differences in culture that we have and form together, that's a threat. That's why they push these people. These people got giant YouTube channels. All they do is talk about the culture war because they want to divide Black America and white America, because there's a lot of different cultural tendencies. And this is why MLK is extremely terrifying for the establishment. We went from a leader that advocated for militant class solidarity and uniting the working class, and now we got a black leadership class, a black bourgeoisie class, whose number one priority is defending a Harvard president who made a mistake of not advocating for censorship enough. Their number one concern is defending Claudine fucking Gay, as black people are being crushed by the police state, but that's the number one issue they care about. That's how our community have been distracted by identity politics and the culture wars that the Democratic Party and the Republican Party play along with. Now, another thing I want to add to this, another reason why white America hated them, obviously the class thing is giant. That's everything when it comes to this. But the Vietnam War was another thing when he came out against the Vietnam War. And militarism, when you combine those two, and I don't think there's an answer where you can say one was more impactful than the other. I think both class and stand up against war got him killed. But we went from MLK, who stood up against the Vietnam War, and now we got Hakeem Jeffries and black leaderships who want to arm Nazis in Ukraine. How the hell did that happen? I mean, that's what we do at RBN. We analyze, like, how could something like that possibly happen? Went from opposing war, and now the black leadership class support Nazis in Ukraine. And Go ahead.
Oh, you were watching any of those?
I just was telling y'all that yesterday. These brothers watch the platform. The congressional black cones we can hold them in contempt. Treason. They done went from Dr. King and our leaders, Malcolm, Fred Hampton, Huey P., denouncing imperialism, denouncing attacking countries all over the world, to now, like he said, Hakeem Jeffries and the congressional black cones, they with it. They went along with the bombing of Libya, black people getting put back in cages. Like he just mentioned, they absolutely went along with arming Nazis in Ukraine. They can't get away from that. They said that was Putin talking points. They never gave a damn about that. It's just, they have embarrassed us on the world stage, because now the world see our leaders, they don't have no backbone and they don't have no morals.
I watch all these prison
Oh,
YouTubes,
so-called.
you know, ex-prisoner kind of, and so California, this is the most racially segregated prison system.
Yeah,
And
the prison.
yeah, and then you got, you know, I mean, every prison has this, I guess, but like your trustees and shot callers, and that's what all these people are that try to enforce the identity bullshit. Those are the trustees of the big prison that they're slowly building around you. As I get any walls, you just get it online or have everybody else filtered out, and you're going to stay with your own kind because that's easier to control.
Right, right. Well, let me ask you guys, do you feel, because I was listening to MLK's after Vietnam speech, and I feel this way across the board, everyone got stupider. Like, you listen to that and the depth of intelligence and knowledge and philosophical heft in his speeches, and that's true of a lot of your great figures of that period. And today, I mean, you look at someone like Barack Obama, who has skills. There's no depth to any of his stuff, right? I mean, there's nothing there. It's just the figure of it. It's the vague shadow of a memory.
I can't remember
a great, meaningful speech used to sound like.
You're right, dude.
And there's just no substance.
I can't
to
quote
it.
one line.
So, right.
What is American culture? Like, this is a rhetorical question. I would say American culture is anti-intellectualism. Like, anti-intellectualism was
I hate nerds.
On us. Yeah. How dare you guys do your own research? Remember? They demonize you for doing your own research. They demonize you for looking into stuff. Like, the average person can't even define terrorism. They just call everyone a terrorist. They can't define it. Most people don't know what international law is. Most people don't have no idea what these things. This is weaponized by the ruling class. This is why at RBN we talk about how we need to weaponize intelligence. I advocate for people reading theory. If you don't have time to read theory, you need to watch someone who read theory. The working class need to be intelligent. We need to have strategies how we move. We can't just be vibing. The Bernie left has just been vibing. We need a strategy. We need to be militant. The Black Panthers, they wasn't just effing around vibing. They had a plan. Every revolution has a plan. We need to reject. I know it can sound elitist in some way. You know what I mean? To say that people must learn stuff. Because this general society, like, oh, who cares? We don't know anything. People are just happy in their ignorance. No, the working class must reject anti-intellectualism. We must learn our history. We must take everything the government says and assume they're lying. We must learn media literacy. We do propaganda report on RBN. We did it a few times on Post-Duopoly Show, where we just watch stuff that people view as real news, and it's mind-blowing.
Yeah.
There's no media literacy. People have no idea when they're reading propaganda at all. And this has led to the working class being destroyed. That led to us having a massive police state. If you wonder why we got 800 military bases and how we get away with it, we get away with it because people don't know what the hell's going on. The ruling class weaponized anti-intellectualism, and this is something I have been unapologetically fighting against. I am advocating for the workers to learn, to read. I don't care if it's uncomfortable. I don't care if it sounds elitist. They want us to be dumb, and we got to fight back against it. But go ahead, Russ.
You're right. And I mean, something that I remember when I got involved with the Bernie movement, and I'll be curious to know if you heard this too. You have those old 60s radicals who never sold out, who never became yuppies.
Yeah.
A lot of them would say to me, you're wasting your time. This whole political two-party thing, that's not where it's at. Get involved in grassroots, get involved in mutual aid. But this is going nowhere. Did you have that experience?
That's what radicalized me to the point where I'm at right now, because the failure of the Bernie campaign. As I mentioned earlier, I was a sweet, sweet summer child.
Yeah.
I looked at.
That's what Nick, let me just say this. This is what Nick says about a naive person. Kind of like, poor baby, a sweet summer child. That's what we use.
And the reason why I say that, because I looked at the professional managerial class left, and I'm like, okay, I'm a college dropout. I don't know anything. These people are scholarly. Yeah. They read history. That's what I thought. I thought they had a legitimate plan. They studied neoliberalism, and they know how the best way to attack neoliberalism. So as someone who don't
getting funded
who wasn't
by them,
educated, I was following those people. I was like, all right, they want Medicare for all.
Did you have that experience of like these old 60s radicals would tell me this at the time? They were telling me I was naive to get involved with the Bernie campaign. Like these people who have been doing it since then, they would say that.
Been to a
they would say that to me, like.
Come see us do a live stand-up show. We'll be in Venice, California, Palmdale, California.
Robert Biden Jr., we charge you with genocide. We charge you with genocide. We charge you with genocide.
Approaching the 100th day of Israel's genocidal bombing of Gaza, hundreds of thousands of people from around the United States traveled to Washington, D.C. for another march on the White House, the second such national.
That's how you know who control the media, because if you wasn't online or social media, you wouldn't even know that it was 400,000, almost 500,000 people in Washington calling Joe genocidal Joe, letting them know he'll never get back into office. You would never know that because they don't want to put it on it. And that's crazy. I said, what the? Yes, they control the flow of information that they can control. Now, had them people been holding the Israeli signs and saying that Israel had a right to defend itself, it would have been the biggest story of the weekend. But since it wasn't that, 500,000 people saying genocidal Joe, you ain't getting back in office, they try to act like this didn't happen.
National march to take place since October 7th. Since the last national march, the Biden administration has done everything in its power to make this genocide their own. From bypassing its own rules to send emergency weapons shipments to Israel, using its veto power in the UN Security Council to cover for Israel's genocide, and most recently, deploying its military to protect Israel from the Yemeni resistance. Members of the administration have issued statements paying lip service to the murder of Palestinians, but judging by the mood on Saturday, it's clear that many people have lost their patience.
Biden, you're supporting genocide!
I'm not gonna lie, I very much lost hope with the political arm. If any change were to happen, it's gonna happen from the people. It's gonna be grassroots. It's gonna be through organizations and news medias that are not very mainstream.
The things he lied about not doing, like over the whole course of this whole issue, I wasn't really surprised, but I can say that he's not getting my vote. I don't think he should be our president at all. We are literally funding what's happening over there. I feel like it's my job to be here protesting and fighting against it in any way that I can.
We're here to show that this matters to us. We will not forget. We will remember. And our vote or our withholding of our vote will be our voice. So if somebody wants our vote, show us that you're going to represent us, not whatever lobbyist, not anybody else, but us, the American people.
Joe Biden has lost almost all support among Arab American voters, just 17% of whom said they would still vote for Biden in 2024, down from 59% in 2020. This could easily cost Joe Biden the election. Take three key swing states Joe Biden won in 2020, Michigan, Arizona, and Georgia. He won Michigan by 154,000 votes, Arizona by 10,500 votes, and Georgia by 11,800 votes. The Arab populations for these states are 278,000, 60,000, and 57,000 respectively. In other words, losing even a small percentage of support among Arab Americans could cost Biden these vital states. Biden's support for Israel has also hurt his chances with young voters, 56% of whom rate his handling of the last 100 days as poor. His overall approval rating has plummeted to the lowest rating for any president in the last 15 years, at just 33%. In the last week, the Biden administration stooped to genocide denial, with members of the administration calling South Africa's lawsuit alleging Israeli violations of the UN Genocide Convention meritless and counterproductive.
What does it mean to you that South Africa is raising these genocide charges, and what are you hoping to see?
It means a lot to me. It means a lot that's coming from a country of South Africa, which experience a rich history of discrimination and apartheid, and the people of South Africa, brave people who went through what the Palestinian people are going through right now. And I'm glad that it's coming from South Africa, from a great country like South Africa. It's not coming from one of the Arab countries around the area. I think they are under the control of the Israelis and the Americans. And I'm really, really happy that there is one country in this world are willing to stand up and say enough is enough. This is genocide, and this is got to stop, and it needs to stop right now.
We have been waiting for 75 years for somebody to submit a case against Israel to stop their brutal occupation, stop their atrocities against the Palestinian people. We have been waiting, and thanks God somebody just heard our voice and finally submitted this. And we are deep in the debt of the South African country and people. And as Nelson Mandela said, without free Palestine, our freedom is not full.
Biden is in a further bind in regards to Yemen. The Yemeni resistance has blocked all Israeli ships passing through the Red Sea, choking off Israel's supply lines in solidarity with Gaza. As president, one of Biden's primary roles is to protect American capital, and he went as far as to carry out airstrikes in Yemen, killing several Yemenis, making it clear to voters that he considers the flow of trade more important than Palestinian lives. But the Yemenis have pledged to continue their blockade and have said they'll start targeting American ships, forcing Biden to decide if he's willing to turn this into a regional war by throwing U.S. forces into the mix. Wall Street and the billionaires are counting on Biden to defend their ships at all costs, but in doing so, Biden would be doing the very thing that his base doesn't want to see the most: U.S. forces being deployed to defend Israel.
Yemen has shown us a country that's been consecutively bombed by 4 U.S. presidents, bombed, and they're facing famine, and not because they don't have the resources or because they're weak, but because they've literally been targeted, and yet somehow the weakest, poorest country in the Middle East has been the one to come to the aid of the Palestinians, and not even at the cost of other lives. They haven't killed a single person. They haven't murdered a single person, yet the backlash from the U.S. and from the UK has cost them lives. They've bombed their capitals. They went to their homes. They haven't come near our homes here in the U.S., but so Yemen, we are proud of you, we love you, we appreciate you, and we see you.
Shout out, Allah yakhallikum ya Yemen, intu ma'ana. Shout out to my brothers in Yemen, who are the only country, they don't have their own water, they don't have their own food. Allah yakhallikum ya Islam for Yemen, and South Africa. These are the true, carrying on the legacy of Nelson Mandela. These are the true men of the world, the true women who support. And we may different religion, different race, but we're all a part of the human race. And when one part of us bleeds, all of us bleed.
No one could have predicted that Palestine would be the issue that could make or break this coming election. But in hindsight, is it really that much of a surprise? This is, after all, a modern-day genocide being perpetrated in our name using our tax dollars. For all the lip service U.S. politicians give to upholding human rights and democracy, for some reason, they never thought their own support for the genocidal Israeli state would come into question. Biden wasn't actually home during Saturday's march. He was vacationing at Camp David. But if there's any lesson to take away from the last 100 days, it's that this issue isn't going away anytime soon. It would do Biden well to come out of hiding and to face this issue head on, because it's not as complicated as he thinks. Protesters have been offering him a way out since day one, and it's a mild ask at best. Stop supporting this modern-day genocide and hold the perpetrators accountable.
The scholar, the theologian, Dr. Cornell West. Let the word go forth here and now that we are going to hold up the blood-stained banner and the tear-soaked cause of our precious Palestinian brothers and sisters. Not just in Gaza and West Bank, but all around the world. And it is in the name of truth, and the condition of truth is to allow suffering to speak. It's in the name of justice. And justice is what love looks like in public. Yes, it's indeed true that Brother Martin Luther King Jr. would have been 95 years old on Monday. And he, like myself, comes from a tradition of a great black people who have been hated and terrorized and traumatized for 400 years, but we still here fighting. We still here swinging. So I'm here to let my precious Palestinian brothers and sisters and siblings know that when I think of where I come from, for every generation, we have love warriors who were willing to live and who are willing to die. Martin Luther King Jr. said, I'd rather be dead than afraid. I'd rather be a corpse than a coward. We need courage. We need love and freedom in love. Don't let anybody lie on you and say that we here in the name of hatred. We don't hate anybody. We love Palestinians. We love oppressed people no matter where they are, any corner of the globe. They could be on the chocolate side of Washington, D.C. They could be Dalits in India. They could be landless peasants in Brazil. They could be indigenous peoples. They can be Iranians. They can be Iraqis. Anybody. This is a human thing we're here for. So when you hear all the lies that hide and conceal the crimes, remember what Brother Martin used to say, no lie can live forever. Truth crushed the earth shall rise again. I see it in your faces. I see it in your eyes. I see it in your hearts. I see it in your body. And oh, I wish you can see how beautiful you look. Isn't that the truth, my brother? Oh, yes. Beautiful you look. All the different colors and genders and cultures and sexual orientations and national identities. Why? Because you're here in the name of truth and justice, and we are going to raise our voices, put our bodies on the line, and yes, even go to jail and even die. Oh, let me tell you a story. Let me tell you a story. December 17th, 1951, there was a great black brother named Paul Robeson. Y'all know who Paul Robeson was. Give it up for Paul Robeson. He went to the United Nations with a petition that said, we charge genocide. He was talking about black people in the American Empire. And it is consistent to be in solidarity with South Africa, because we don't have to charge genocide. We see it with our very eyes, day in and day out. Those precious babies, the precious men, the precious women. What kind of world are we living in? America, what kind of country? What kind of empire? All of that barbarity, all of that bestiality, and we still have to march in Washington before the Capitol and the White House. My God. It's true. It's amazing to me. I think of Biden and Harris and Austin and Blinken and Sullivan and Kirby. I can mention all the names. And I don't speak
war criminals
in a spirit of hatred. I speak in a spirit of love for oppressed folk, which leads me to hate domination, occupation, subjugation, degradation, any form that loses sight of the humanity of people. And I say personally to Biden and company, you're not just enabling, you're not just facilitating, you're not just coagulating and cooperating with vicious crime of genocide. That makes you war criminals yourself. You ought to be shamed. Who do you think we are? You think that you can suppress the love that we have for our Palestinian brothers and sisters? No, you got the wrong people.
Talk that talk, Dr. West.
And I would say the same thing if they were Jewish brothers and sisters. The same thing if they were Haitian brothers and sisters. Same things as Ethiopian brothers and sisters. Don't get it twisted. We trying to have some space of morality and spirituality in a moment of overwhelming barbarity. And I can hear the voices of Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass. I can hear the voices of Claudia Jones. I can hear the voices of W.B. Du Bois. I can hear the voices of John Coltrane's Love Supreme. I can hear the voices of Curtis Mayfield. I can hear the voices of Gil Scott-Heron. They're not just isolated names. They are forces in history that constitute our souls so that we can straighten our backs up. And Brother Martin used to say, anytime, every day people straighten their backs up, they're going somewhere because folk can't ride your back unless it's bent. Our backs are straight. Our backs are ready. We are fortified. We ready to fight. We ready to resist with resilience. And when they tell us that the claims of our South African brothers and sisters are meritless, and you see they've said the names a number of times, so you know they got talking points. Meritless. Have you seen Gaza? Have you seen West Bank? Not just after August 7th. Did you see it in 1948? Did you see it in 1967? Did you see it in 2008? Did you see it in 2014? And you're still looking, and all you can say is meritless. Biden, how cold-hearted and mean-spirited can you be? Got the nerve to go down to a black church where black people were crushed by some sick white supremacist brother. And then you know you're enabling blowing up mosques in Gaza, blowing up churches in Gaza, blowing up places where Jesus himself was born. I'm a Christian. I'm a revolutionary Christian. I come out of the household of Irene and Clifton. I come out of Shiloh Baptist Church. I'm influenced by the Black Panther Party. Don't tell me. Don't tell me that you can
and
see
on
what
that
I
business,
see
Dr.
and call it meritless. We'll never put up with that. We'll never accommodate ourselves to that. And that's why we call it for more than a ceasefire. We want an end to the siege. We want an end to the occupation. We want Palestinians to live a life of dignity. Am I going on too long? One last point. One last point. Because we're getting ready to march. Oh, yeah. But when I talk about free Palestine, and one of these days it's going to happen, I may not live to see it for myself, but I know I would have done all that I could to bear witness with every bone in my body. But I want that free Palestine to be a place where we're able to bring together human beings in such a way that, yes, we would be concerned about Jewish safety and security. Nobody's calling for the annihilation of Jewish brothers and sisters, but you'll never have Jewish security. You'll never have Jewish safety if you don't have Palestinian security, if you don't have Palestinian safety. That's what we're talking about. We want equality. We want equality. We want equality.
Thank you, Dr. Cornell West.
Iran has claimed responsibility for a series of airstrikes into Iraq, Pakistan, and northern Syria this week that they claim targeted a, quote, Israeli spy headquarters and targets linked to the extremist Islamic State. Pakistan has recalled its ambassador to Tehran and warned that Iran could face serious consequences. Islamabad described the strikes as an unprovoked violation of its airspace and claims 2 children were killed. Iran's foreign minister sat down with CNBC from Davos to deliver a sobering message to President Biden.
And keep the promises that they have made to us. The second thing I would like to say is that the United States should not, Mr. Biden should not, tie their destiny to the fate of Netanyahu. The full-scale cooperation of Biden and the White House with thugs like Netanyahu in Israel is the root of insecurity in the region. President Biden should immediately abandon his full support for this genocide of the Palestinians and the killing of more than 13,500 Palestinian children. Netanyahu has reached the end of the tunnel, and no medical equipment and no oxygen capsule can revive or save Netanyahu. But throughout history, resistance against the occupation has always been legitimate. We benefit from the peace and security in the region. The security of the Red Sea, the Persian Gulf, and international waters is in our interest. Stop the war in Gaza and allow peace to be restored in our region.
Meanwhile, American diplomats have sent a, quote, private message to their counterparts in Yemen after the U.S. and U.K. bombed portions of the country to stop the Houthi-led blockade of weapons and shipments from entering Israel. The Houthis launched a series of counterstrikes this week, including one that hit a U.S.-owned vessel. They vowed further retaliation. Joining us now to weigh in on the state of things in the region is host of Daniel Davis Deep Dive, retired Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis. Welcome back to Rising.
Hi, thanks for having me back. Always love to be here.
We love to have you. Help us understand the posture here of what's going on. Obviously, different sides are representing differences of responsibility and whether or not the strikes that have been conducted are legitimate, both morally and under international law. What's your read?
Well, I tell you, this is a very alarming state of affairs that exists right now, and something we need to be paying a lot of attention to, because the whole Middle East now is like a powder keg which could explode. And what you're seeing here is the process of the fact that we don't have a good strategy for the region, because we want to basically try to have everything. You want your cake and eat it too. We want a peaceful Middle East, but we want to be able to go and launch strikes anytime we want. We want to be able to let Israel do whatever they want to do and not say anything differently, but we don't want other people in the region to be mad. And the end result is you're basically going to have nothing that you want. You don't have peace, and you don't have a situation where the Israelis are happy or moving towards peace or any of those kinds of things. When we started having American troops that were attacked in Syria and Iraq, we had these so-called strong messages that we wanted to send a message to Iran and to these groups. And of course, the message was laughed at because they're little pinprick attacks. And these people are ready for combat, as we should see here. Now we're trying to do the same thing in the Red Sea. Then, with Houthis in there, now we're, assassinating people in Baghdad, as well as Israel. And it's just causing this powder keg to go higher. And here's the alarming thing. You see that Iran is losing their fear of the United States because they're openly taking credit for some of these things. And now in that clip you just showed with the foreign minister basically lecturing us, I mean, they wouldn't have done that in the past because they had been afraid of the response. But right now, they're not afraid of the response. And you have the U.S. constantly saying at every level,
the promises that
we don't want an escalation. We don't want an escalation. But they're willing to do these little things because they want them to work, but they're not going to work because Iran can handle that. These real groups can handle that kind of stuff, and it just emboldens them to go more. And the danger is that finally you get it like these guys like Jack Keane, like Lindsey Graham, who were saying wipe, a lot of these things in Iran off the map. that Biden maybe goes in too heavy, and then we find ourselves in a war. And this is a very, very dangerous time for us right now.
Absolutely, and we don't want to see larger conflict in the region. Although I guess some people, as you sort of just pointed out, might say, well, if these pinpricks don't work, if Iran doesn't fear us, they need to be made to fear us, not with some kind of open conflict with what Lindsey Graham wants to do. But are we required then to respond to the Houthis in a more who have actually attacked at this point U.S. ships? So we have some ability to even, constitutionally speaking, to respond. Do we need to make some kind of show of force to put the region back in line?
Yeah, that's exactly what Jack Keane says. He said on Fox, I believe it was just yesterday, that we need to go in there with a strong show of force and to hit, strong targets within Iran to show them what we're talking about. But we don't want a war. So he also wants his cake and eat it too. But here's the thing. We're in a horrible situation now because of years of a bad policy and years of doing things the wrong way. So right now, Robbie, there's no easy answer for this. There's no all right, if I was suddenly in charge, I'd tell Biden to do this and then everything would be okay. This is a case right now to where it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't. And we have to do everything necessary to make sure this does not expand and explode into a war, which could be catastrophic for our interests. So what I would suggest is that we need to start using a lot more diplomacy, and that means with Iran, with the Houthis, with Israel, and saying, all right, look, there's no going to be more blank check to do whatever you want because we have our own interests to worry about. And if necessary, we may have to go heavier than we have militarily if and only if American military or personnel interests are directly attacked. And I'm talking about, like the United States military, not just a U.S. flagged ship, because that is not enough, according to the U.S. Constitution and the 1973 War Powers Act, to take military action. And on that point, I would like to say any expansion of military force must go through Congress first. We have to follow our laws so that everybody knows what's at stake. Jack Keane, President Biden, they can't just say, yeah, let's launch some missiles, which could spawn a war for us. This must go through the people and the Congress.
Now, Iran's foreign minister, who we saw in that clip a little bit ago, really pointed to the idea that this is all stemming from the ongoing siege of Gaza, that people around the world, but in particularly in the Arab world, are horrified by what they see as a disproportionate response to October 7th. Of course, the Houthi blockade is premised on the idea that they're blockading ships in order to discourage Israel from continuing its siege on Gaza, saying they'll let ships through that have nothing to do with Israel, and that the blockade would stop if the siege stopped. That does suggest a kind of diplomatic solution will ultimately be the solution here. But as you pointed out, and as that Iranian official pointed out, it seems to be one that the United States and Joe Biden in particular is roundly willing to ignore. To that point, last night, Bernie Sanders put forward a resolution to encourage the State Department to report on any human rights violations by Israel during its military campaign. That vote failed 11-72. Just 11 senators were willing to vote for the mere threshold of an investigation into whether or not Israel is committing any kind of violations of international law in the regions. What does that vote portend to you?
Well, I tell you, look, we're at a point now where we're just going to have to decide what is important to us. Is it important to keep the basically the facade and the way things have always been, and the way that just the reflexive pro-Israel everything has always been, or do we want to recognize actual reality? Because I'm telling you, a lot of people won't want to hear this, but the fact is, we're going to have to start telling Israel, no more blank check. There are going to be some strings to this because our interests are now being harmed. And let me tell you why and how. Because all these countries all over the world, not the least of which is South Africa, and many countries are in the agreement with them, like some of the global South. I'm talking scores of countries are recognizing this. So this whole thing about us constantly just being the only voice in the United Nations or the UNSC that vetoes things while the whole rest of the world is in another side is giving emboldened to Iran to take actions like this, to the Houthis to take actions like this, because they see it's no longer all the world against them, but now it's increasingly part of the world against us because they don't like what's going on with the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip. And so if we want to change that dynamic, we're going to have to do something we don't want to do, and that is to tell Israel, you're going to have to cool the jets. Because if we don't, if we keep going on the path we are, these things are going to continue on, and we may come to a place where we're forced into either escalating into a war or backing down and being seen as losing diplomatically, both of which are bad outcomes for America. But that's where we're headed if we don't make some tough choices on our own.
Lieutenant Colonel, thank you so much for joining.
Now, just yesterday said, no, we're going to continue doing what we are doing. Unacceptable.
Well, politely asking someone like Benjamin Netanyahu to do anything is a laughable way of handling the situation. And that's what we've been hearing over and over again in regard to the Biden administration and its handling of this war in Gaza. Now, Senator Bernie Sanders lays out how the Israeli government continues to ignore Biden and conduct their war on Gaza in a way that fails to spare the lives of Palestinian civilians. And now new reporting from Axios continues on with this same humiliating narrative for the president, that he's losing patience with Netanyahu. He has asked politely for Netanyahu to stop indiscriminate bombing in the Gaza Strip. And of course, you have Netanyahu respond by saying, we're gonna continue this war, because make no mistake about it, Netanyahu's political interests really rely on him continuing the war. He knows the second the war is over, it's very likely that he's going to face criminal prosecution. The country is not in favor of him, they're against him. Even now with this ongoing war, Israelis want him out. But again, the Israeli government does not care what Biden has to say. Biden has given Israel his full backing with unprecedented military and diplomatic support, even while taking a political hit from part of his base in an election year. That support has largely continued publicly, but behind the scenes, there are growing signs that Biden is losing his patience, the US official who spoke to Axios said. So I just want you to take in what I read to you, okay? That is an excerpt from the Axios reporting. You can't on one hand provide unprecedented military support to Israel in its war on Gaza, and then turn around and say, like, I am so frustrated that Netanyahu won't stop with the indiscriminate bombing with the 2,000-pound bombs that I'm supplying him, and the money that I actually went around Congress to provide for Netanyahu and the Israeli government. Remember, Biden did that. He didn't get the hundreds of millions of dollars that he just sent to Israel approved by Congress. He found a way around Congress to send that money unilaterally. You can't do that while simultaneously pretending as though you're concerned about how Israel is carrying out that war. It's ridiculous.
Well, to be fair, Biden found a way around Congress to get Americans $15 minimum wage and higher wages and paid family leave and voting. Oh, right, he didn't do any of that. When it came to those issues and helping the average American, he was like, oh, there's nothing I can do. Congress, filibuster, oh my God. Oh, Israel needs to commit more war crimes? Yes, right away. Who cares about Congress? I don't need stinking Congress. Oh, attacking the Houthi rebels. Attack them, bomb them, bomb them. I don't need congressional approval. Congress is useless, irrelevant. Helping the average American? Congress, filibuster, parliamentarian. Come on, guys, you're obvious frauds. So look, let me ask you if you're one of these, Democratic diehards who are like, oh, Democratic leadership, they're always saints and wonderful. So answer me and riddle me this. Is Joe Biden a pathetic weakling or a moron or both? Because there isn't another option. So does Joe Biden not know that the way to get any person to do what you want, that is the leader of a foreign government, is consequences? Like, does he really, is he so unbelievably stupid as the president of the United States that he's like, well, I begged him and he said, no, I guess there's nothing else I can do. Come on, nobody thinks Biden's that stupid, right? So what is he then? He's pathetically weak. He came and said, hey, Netanyahu, straighten up. This is America, okay? We give you all this funding. I gave you all this stuff for free. We give you billions of dollars every year for free. I'm about to send you $14 billion extra for free, right? I supply everything that you ever asked. So can you please not do just a little bit that we're asking, right? We're not telling you to stop the bombing. We're not telling you to stop all war crimes. We just said, can you reduce the war crimes by a little bit? And Netanyahu goes, puh, and slaps him across the face. And we've got quotes we're gonna show you, right? And Biden goes, okay, you win. I swear I won't do anything. Come on, how pathetic and humiliating.
It is humiliating. It's humiliating for the Biden administration. It's also humiliating for America to be led by a president who on one hand is supplying the weaponry that Israel is using to carry out the very war that Biden is alleging to have issues with. And by the way, I don't know what's really transpiring with Biden. My read of this, and I could be completely wrong, but I genuinely think that Biden is trying to have his cake and eat it too. He's trying to continue supporting Israel's war on Gaza while attempting to appear more sympathetic to the portion of the Democratic base, namely younger voters who increasingly are becoming more and more vocal about this war, who are increasingly against Biden and how he's been supportive of the Israeli government and this war. I think it's a political move that is not really boding well because we're not idiots.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Anna. So let me clarify. He's stuck between a rock and a hard place in his way of thinking, because on the one hand, he thinks I need the donors, and I don't care if your feelings are hurt. The defense contractors, oil companies, and yes, AIPAC, a Democratic majority for Israel, are giant donors. If you think politicians don't care about donors, well, you don't know anything about politics. Please go do something else, okay? So that includes every stupid reporter in Washington. Oh, the lobbyists, might that affect Biden? Oh, no, don't write about it. Don't write about it. Come on, guys. We all have eyes. Okay, so he wants the donor money from all those different industries, et cetera. But at the same time, he's down by 10 in Michigan. And if you don't win Michigan, you have a 0% chance of winning the race if you're a Democrat. Okay, so now he lost the young vote. He's now trailing Trump by 4 in the young vote. If you lose the young vote as a Democrat, you have a 0% chance of winning. So he's like, well, I can't win without the donors. I can't win without the voters. I'm stuck. And literally in the Axios piece, they have guys from the Biden administration saying we are stuck. Now, the reality is you're not stuck. Make a decision. You know what decision you should make? The voters. But he's so hooked on donor money. He's like, I need it, give it to me, hit it me in the main way. The idea that you would say no to the donors for people like Joe Biden who are career politicians in America is unthinkable. They think that's my boss. Yeah. I can't say no to my boss.
Okay, so let's actually get to the quotes. But remember, Biden doesn't want to deal with AIPAC the same way John Fetterman, a newly elected senator, doesn't want to deal with AIPAC. So that's also a huge part of it. It shows an incredible amount of weakness. Well, by the way, also insulting the intelligence of the American people who see what's going on. Again, you can't claim you have a problem with this war as you are funding and providing the weaponry for the war. Now, not only is the Biden administration allegedly concerned about how Israel is not allowing for the flow of humanitarian aid to go into the Gaza Strip, they're also frustrated by Netanyahu's unwillingness to seriously discuss the plans for the day after the war ends. They're frustrated by his rejection of the US plan for a reformed Palestinian Authority to have a role in the post-Hamas Gaza. And Secretary of State Anthony Blinken was very blunt with Netanyahu and his war cabinet, stressing that the Israeli government's plan for the day after the war is pie in the sky, a US official said. Now, what does that mean? What is Israel's plan? Well, we've shared it with you. There's a push to essentially ethnically cleanse Palestinians from the Gaza Strip. There have been secret talks with various governments to see which countries would be willing to absorb Palestinian refugees. There were talks about Congo taking in some of those Palestinian refugees. And allegedly, you have Secretary of State Anthony Blinken arguing, no, that's not gonna happen. But if Netanyahu and the right-wing Israeli government, if they want it, What are they going to do to stop that from happening? It appears nothing. It's just talk. Blinken also told Israeli leaders that no Arab country is going to bail them out on the rebuilding and governance of Gaza if Israel doesn't allow the PA to have a role and doesn't allow for a political horizon for the Palestinians. So the other option that Israeli officials have been thinking about is, well, what if we just occupy the Gaza Strip, right? Instead of ethnically cleanse, whoever remains in Gaza will be occupied by the Israeli government. That's the other plan that's been floating around. Now, there are also no signs that Israel is transitioning to a low intensity stage of this war. US officials are now growing increasingly concerned that Israel won't meet its timetable to transition to low intensity operations in Gaza by the end of January. And one official who spoke to Axios on condition of anonymity said, quote, "The situation sucks and we are stuck." Others who are willing to speak to Axios on the record, including Democratic Senator Chris Van Hollen, just bluntly says, at every juncture, Netanyahu has given Biden the finger. They are pleading with the Netanyahu coalition, but getting slapped in the face over and over again. Netanyahu appears more willing to listen to the ultra-nationalist ministers in his government, namely Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich, than to what the president of the United States says, Senator Van Hollen told Axios. And guess what? He's correct. In fact, let's go to this video featuring a Likud party member by the name of Danny Danon, basically bragging about how the Israeli government has been ignoring what the US government has been asking for. This is a conversation that he had on December 8th. Let's watch.
לא תמיד מסכימים על הכל. היו מחלוקות מההתחלה דרך אגב. הם לא הסכימו לתימון קרקעי, נכנסנו קרקעית. הם לא הסכימו לבית חולים שיפה, התעלמנו מהבקשה שלהם. הם רצו הפוגה בלי חטופים, לא הסכמנו להם. מה שדווח בהתחלת המהדורה, ולשמחתי תוקן, אין אולטימטום אמריקאי. אין דדליין של ארצות הברית. אנחנו עובדים, צריכים להמשיך להכות בחמאס, וגם אם זה יבוא למקום של עימות עם ארצות הברית, צריך להמשיך עד הסוף.
So just to reiterate for our audio listeners, he said they didn't agree to a ground invasion, we invaded. They, meaning the Americans, didn't agree on attacking Al-Shifa Hospital, we ignored their request. They wanted a pause without hostages, we didn't accept that. What was reported in the beginning of the program, and I'm glad was corrected, we have no American ultimatum, there is no deadline from the United States. So there you have it. I mean, if there's no pressure by the United States, with real consequences, then why would the Israeli government listen to anything that Biden is politely asking them to do?
They're spitting in our face publicly and laughing their ass off about it. What are you gonna do? You're not the boss of us. You give us money, but we don't have to do anything for you. You have to do things for us on top of the money that we're taking from you. And they go on their TV, they brag about it. I mean, you have to understand the context of Chris Van Hollen. He is a very mainstream establishment Democrat. For him to say that we're getting slapped in the face, talking like we do, that Bibi gave Biden the middle finger. Okay, that means all their polling is a disaster. That means the Democrats are worried they're all gonna lose their seats because the American people do not want to keep butchering Palestinians. So that's why Van Hollen's saying this, otherwise he would never say it either, okay? Did you see that part in the quote that Anna read you? The president's patience is running out. No, it's not. The president's patience is infinite. How dare he defy the leader of a foreign government? He thinks he can. Where's your patience? Where is it really running out, Joe? What are you gonna do something? You're gonna sit there and bleed all day, and you're gonna take every humiliating put down an insult from Netanyahu, and you're gonna do as he orders you to do. Look, this is facts. So, okay, we'll give you more quotes. Now, this is Benjamin Netanyahu. I'm gonna read from his social feed. He gave a speech on the 100-day anniversary of the war, right? And he says in part of it, several days ago, I met with Secretary of State Blinken. I thanked him for the American assistance, and I emphasized to him, we embarked on this war after we were massacred. We are not stopping. We are continuing until we eliminate Hamas and return our hostages. Now remember, we just explained to you, Blinken went down there and said, get realistic about the end game here. You can't ethnically cleanse all these people. You can't reoccupy. You can't go until Hamas is all wiped out. We don't know when Hamas is gonna get wiped out. We don't even know how many Hamas there are. It's an unwinnable solution, right? That's not really a solution at all. And here is Netanyahu going, yeah, I met with Blinken. I thanked him for the money that he gave me like a sucker because I told him to, I ordered him to, and then I told him I'm not gonna listen to a goddamn thing he says. I'm gonna do exactly what I said. But wait, there's more. He said, I told him something else. This is not just our war, it's also your war. Why? Why is it our war? Look at him. This is in public. You go read it on Twitter right now. He's ordering us around brazenly. He says, okay, continue. This is a war of the sons of light against the sons of darkness. Hilarious. There's a war against acts of evil led by Iran and its three proxies, Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis. And I added, I do not forget, not even for a moment, that in addition to the war in Gaza, in addition to the return of our hostages and the return of the residents to their homes in both the north and the south, we have another constant existential mission to prevent Iran from attaining nuclear weapons. This is my mission. This is our mission.
No, that's not his mission.
Hold on.
He has been a detriment to that.
100%, 100%. But I'll come back to that last thing. He said, I told Secretary of State Blinken, this needs to be your highest mission too. Oh, thank you very much for the order. Now we'll go run along and have this tiny, tiny little country that's supposed to be an ally that does nothing but get us in trouble, gets us hated by the whole world, that is not a democracy, that imprisons 5 million Palestinians and butchers them anytime that they like. And now he's giving us orders publicly. Your mission is to attack Iran on my behalf. I don't want to die there, but you guys go die for me. Hey, send me the money. Give me the goddamn money. Slap across the face. I told you already. I already ordered you. You're going to war with Iran. Oh, I see. What is this? What is this? Is America mighty and great? Doesn't look like it. Tiny little country Israel controls us easily. By the way, the rest of the countries, you guys are morons. You can all buy, this is not a thing about people control this or that. No, anybody can buy an American politician. Nicaragua can buy all of our politicians. You just have to set up lobbies. And then they'll all work for you like dogs. And by the way, the Saudis do too, and so does Qatar and some of the other Gulf countries. They all buy our politicians and they work for them, not us. That's just, you saw it with your own eyes in quotes from the Israeli government bragging about how they never have to listen to us, and the American taxpayer has to send their hard-earned money to him to start more wars that your sons and daughters are gonna fight. But there's nothing we can do about it because we've been ordered. If you enjoyed this video, that's because of our members. They make us independent, they make us strong, and they make us honest. Become a member today by hitting the join button below.
Less than a year ago, establishment support for Ukraine was so high that Zelensky received a warm welcome at the Grammys. Cut to the present, the US has now suspended military aid to Ukraine. Here's John Kirby making that announcement.
New updates on military assistance to Ukraine. I mean, has the well really run dry here, or what does it look like?
We have issued the last drawdown package that we had funding to support, and that's why it's critical that Congress move on that national security supplemental request and we get more funding. The assistance that we provided has now ground to a halt. The attacks that the Russians are conducting are only increasing. And now, as I talked about earlier this week, they're using North Korean ballistic missiles to do their dirty work. So the need is acute right now, particularly in these winter months.
Ukraine will likely not receive any more funding unless Congress passes a new spending package. The deal is seemingly contingent on some sort of compromise on Republican demands regarding the southern border. So far, the U.S. has directed more than $75 billion in military, financial, and humanitarian support to Ukraine.
Concerns about Ukraine aren't just financially focused. The recent death of Gonzalo Lira in a Ukrainian jail cell has raised questions about the state of civil liberties in the country. Lira was a Chilean-American filmmaker and blogger who was arrested after distributing what the Ukrainian government described as pro-Kremlin propaganda. Now, his father claims he was being abused in prison and that he would likely die there if nothing was done to free him. Here's Lira's last public statement to that effect.
The genesis of this whole situation is because I had an opinion that went against the narrative. And that's why I went to prison. And that's why, if I'm arrested again, I will die in prison. So I ask you, please, as many people as possible, the American State Department knows exactly who I am and the situation I'm currently involved in. And they know the fate that awaits me.
Now, friend of the show, Glenn Greenwald, weighed in saying neither Biden nor his top officials ever once uttered a word about Gonzalo Lira, despite his being an American imprisoned by Ukraine for speaking out, and despite the most unhinged Ukrainians threatening Lira's life. That signaled to Ukraine that they could do anything to him. Again, that's from Glenn Greenwald. So here we are at a point where there is no more aid money for Ukraine. Now, that's not for lack of trying on the administration's part. Right now, Zelensky is at Davos for the World Economic Forum meeting. Our Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, is there as well and said, according to the AP, that he's determined to keep supporting Ukraine. We're working very closely with Congress in order to do that. So the Biden administration would certainly like to send more money to Ukraine. Certain Republican leaders like Mitch McConnell would as well. But it is not for certain right now because there is an appetite to hold out. There's an exhaustion with this funding of the Ukrainian war effort, which has not brought Ukraine any closer to prevailing over Russia. The time for negotiations and peace talks is now. It was yesterday. It was the week and the months before that as well. But here we are.
Yeah, we're now getting an acknowledgement that there were an opportunity to settle this conflict about a month out from Russia's invasion, and that now Ukraine is actually in a less good negotiating position because now it has lost, 500,000 people or so have died in this conflict. They are in the middle of this winter. They're not enjoying the broad, both financial and kind of philosophical support from the world. It does seem like America is now distracted by its new shiny war in the Middle East and is being left against the by the wayside. And of course, you do have the small departure from the bipartisan blob consensus on wanting to fund the war in Ukraine and any other proxy war to, quote unquote, weaken Russia or weaken America's perceived economic enemies. But for the obstruction that the Freedom Caucus presented and the tumult that we saw around the speakership vote over the course of this year, I don't know that there would be as much resistance to the idea of continuing the multi-billion dollars of aid packages that have been going out of the door for the last 2 years now. Now,
yeah, each of those votes were so perfunctory. We're so, well, of course we're going to offer more money, on and on and on.
Right. Now, to this question of this freedom of speech and the journalist who has now died in jail, I'm really struck by the difference between how Evan Gershkovich has been covered by the liberal media at the Correspondents' Dinner. There were free Evan buttons. People have been very concerned about that. Wall Street Journal reporter who was arrested in Russia while on a reporting trip, and compare that to how Gonzalo Lira has been treated. Now, obviously, some of this is a credentialism sort of an issue. A Wall Street Journal reporter is seen as much more credible than someone like Lira, who had a more online sort of a career. He was a pickup artist at one point. He, I think, was more known in kind of alternative right online spaces. That being said, the stated reason for his arrest in Ukraine was, anti-Ukraine propaganda. He was arguing that there was some precedence for the invasion of Russia. And again, we've seen in the United States, many people who have simply argued for some historical context here have been called Putin puppets, been told that they're cheering on Russia's invasion, when in fact they're simply saying, well, this is why the invasion happened. It seems like he was doing some of that kind of reporting, and Ukraine accused him of justifying or cheering on Russia's invasion. And in Ukraine, that is not just something that gets you condemned on Twitter, it's something that can get you thrown in jail and dead.
Yeah, I think that's very fair to point out. And it's not, from my point of view, to discourage or diminish the support for Evan Gershkovich, who's being wholly unjustly held by Russia. Absolutely an attack on the free press and on free speech. But what we see time and time again from mainstream media is it's so selective who benefits from that sympathy. And he deserves it. He absolutely, there's no question he deserves it. But does someone like Julian Assange get that level of support and validation? It's a credentialism thing. The media is reluctant to recognize victims of censorship, imprisonment, due process violations when it's not in there, when it's someone who's estranged from their club. Yeah. And that's exactly what's going on here. It makes you think, what's actually at stake? Is this a conflict between, are we defending the West and Western values and the Enlightenment when a country, Ukraine, and its government has suspended opposition parties, has suspended alternative media, has jailed dissenters? That makes it, that puts us to it. Well, what are we actually fighting here? What are we fighting to defend if our supposed ally is having to resort to behavior that we condemn in Russia, we condemn when it's China, we condemn when it's this geopolitical rival? And I think it makes the whole project very philosophically fraught, because what's actually at stake is not those values, but territory that Russia and Ukraine contest, where the underlying people have some Ukrainian loyalty, but also a lot of Russian loyalty, and should probably have some say in which country they're a part of. It's not a conflict of visions or of global power. It's a dispute over territory.
Well, I would say that it's not just about the territory. It's about, the territory was a proxy battle for economic dominance on the global stage. There's a reason that we're fighting with Russia, and that we had domino theory in the middle part of the last century. And we had, we were all inculcated with the idea that it was America's duty and right to go to war to defeat communism, to force other countries to adopt our own economic worldview. And you don't have to personally like and support communism to be able to see that we would certainly bristle at the idea that another power felt entitled to use military force to undermine what we have decided democratically in our country is the way that we'd like to run our government. And so remember that preceding this conflict, and this is the kind of reporting that I suspect that Lira got in trouble for, that there was a dispute as to whether or not the disputed regions in the East were going to be allowed to have independent vote about whether or not they wanted to accept a kind of Western IMF model controlling the country, or take a package, an economic deal and package that was being offered by Russia. And the concern was that if democratic vote elections were allowed, that Russia was the likely choice. And does America allow its own economic dominance to falter if people are openly choosing an alternative? So, but I think your broader point is completely right. I mean, this is a country that the law under which he was thrown in jail is Article 46-2 of the country's criminal code, which prevents, quote, justifying Russian aggression against Ukraine. You can be thrown in jail for the crime of having a political opinion that is characterized as, quote, justifying Russian aggression against Ukraine. I can't think of anything less in line with our own free speech values and interest than that. And it will be very interesting to see if any Biden officials are forced to weigh in on the death of this particular American citizen abroad.
Yeah, and it will be very interesting to continue to follow the funding issue. Will there be more support for Ukraine if Republicans are able to get their way on the southern border? It'll be very interesting to see. More Rising right after this.
The New York Times increasingly is jumping out in front of the parade being the imminent defeat of Ukraine. They want to be able to say they reported it first. Russia regains upper hand in Ukraine's east as Kiev's troops struggle. So to the person who was obsessed with Keaton's use of the term stalemate, we apologize. Ukrainians are weary, short of ammunition, and outnumbered, and their prospects look bleak. We can stop them for now, but who knows, one soldier said. Tomorrow or the next day, maybe we can't stop them.
This is definitely
it's like a zombie movie. Ukraine's military prospects are looking bleak. Western military aid is no longer assured at the same levels as years past. And now Russian troops are on the attack, especially in the country's east. The town of Marinka has all but fallen. Avdiivka the best I'm going to do with that, is being slowly encircled. A push on Chasev Yar near Bakhmut is expected. Farther north, outside Kupiansk, the fighting has barely slowed since the fall. The joke
maybe we need a war on U.S. soil just so these town names will be easier to pronounce, Jacksonville fell this morning. That's easy,
between Yemen, Gaza, and Ukraine, we're just all making fools out of ourselves.
They should start exporting consonants from their town words. They've got a surplus of consonants in all of that.
That's like the old Steve Martin joke. When you take hostages, make one crazy demand. You demand the letter M be stricken from the English language. The joke among
the Houthis took Delray Beach today. They're expected to reach Fort Myers by the end of the week. See, that's easy. You can report that.
The joke among Ukrainian troops goes like this: the Russian army is not good or bad. It is just long.
What?
Yeah, you know who else made that joke? Napoleon, right before he lost 90% of his troops fucking with those people. The Kremlin has more of everything. Oh, does it? A country with triple the population.
Well, maybe if
as a lot of people were saying 2 fucking years ago.
Maybe if we got them some F-16s faster. Russ.
Yeah, that well, actually, I didn't really, because it's a long article. The Times does try to throw a little bone to people who think that way. Like here and there in the article, it's like, they quote Russian soldiers saying, if the West had acted faster, that would have solved it.
Sean Penn, I want to see Sean Penn come out again because I haven't seen him since his.
I want to see him in a flak jacket. You believe in it so much, go fight, man. Fucking older than a lot of the poor bastards getting dragged out to the front lines now. The Kremlin has
still pretty ripped from what I see.
He's pretty ripped. He's got one of those personal trainers.
They're putting women in now.
The Kremlin has more of everything: more men, ammunition, and vehicles. And they're not stopping despite their mounting numbers of wounded and dead. It's almost like they're fighting this the way the Russians have always fought their wars. Who would have seen that coming?
Ukraine's not stopping.
We're getting there. It's actually darkly funny. For now, Ukraine is in a perilous position. The problems afflicting its military have been exacerbated since the summer. Ukrainian soldiers are exhausted by long stretches of combat and shorter rest periods. The ranks, thinned by mounting casualties, are only being partly replenished, often with older and poorly trained recruits. One Ukrainian soldier, part of a brigade tasked with holding the line southwest of, you're going to make me say that again? Avdiivka, pointed to a video he took during training recently. The instructors, trying to stifle their laughs, were forced to hold up the man, who was in his mid-50s, just so he could fire his rifle. The man was crippled from alcoholism, said the soldier, insisting on anonymity to candidly describe a private training episode. Quote, 3 out of 10 soldiers who show up are no better than drunks who fell asleep and woke up in uniform, he said, referring to the new recruits who arrive at his brigade. While Ukrainian casualties remain a closely guarded secret, U.S. officials over the summer estimated deaths and injuries to be well over 150,000. Russian forces have also taken huge numbers of casualties, according to those officials, but the Kremlin's forces still managed to repel a concerted Ukrainian counteroffensive, regroup, and are now assaulting in frigid winter conditions.
So it's 500,000, by the way, at least, of Ukrainian casualties. Well over.
Well, there's I think we did an article last week. I think the average age of soldiers now on the front line is 42.
43.
43?
Yeah. That's sad when the guys are sad with the singer.
I mean, it's over. It doesn't matter what you give them. You give them as much ammunition as you want. People have to use it.
Why don't they have immigration to help them? Why don't they welcome immigrants there? I'm sure they would love a massive influx.
Well, that could kill 2 birds with 1 stone, so to speak.
Well, I imagine they weren't too keen on that back in the day.
No, you see, when you're a populist, and I would say this is true whether you're populist left, populist right, you wind up having a Cassandra syndrome, meaning you're always very frustrated that you see the future and you're not being listened to. And it happens again and again. You're always 2 years out
right
from the conventional wisdom, and it's not It's not that you have to be a genius. It's that you don't have any vested interest in slaughtering a country. You're not making any money off it. So you're just able to see very clearly. Russia, long history of fighting to the bitter end. Population triple the size of the Ukrainian population. They really can't afford to give up. The idea of them retreating without victory is extremely unlikely. So in a war of attrition, which is going to be what it will end up with, how can they lose? They cannot lose.
Well, maybe if we supported them more and
if we had
allowed
exactly
them to censor us here at home from
well, when you are a
losing.
populist, as you'd say, you don't go through the same kind of conditioning that the PMC types go through. Nick Cruz was talking about this a bit earlier when you had him on. He said, I'm a college dropout. I could tell that Ukraine was an idiotic war to be fighting. Why were all these people with master's degrees and PhDs saying that not only was this a worthwhile fight, but that it was a winnable fight for Ukraine? When
they went to school for that.
It was just as obvious as
they don't
be.
think.
I mean, Russell, you were talking about, you know about the history of Russia and how they fight. I mean, they burned down their own capital to keep Napoleon's army from conquering it, basically. But even if you don't know that, I mean, it's as basic as looking at a map. You can see, okay, Russia's this big, Ukraine's this big. I mean, there's no way to win.
Okay,
you do not have to be an armchair military historian to figure that out.
Right. I mean, there's no way for Ukraine to win that war absent an expanding war. I mean, World War III. Now you're talking about
you would need other countries to
but
come
we also know enough to know we don't want that. Right.
It wouldn't win.
And so that's all it took to see this coming. And you're right. I mean, it is darkly comic. I mean, that line about how you got these guys showing up like
little better than drunks that fell asleep and woke up in uniform.
Oh my God.
Little better than drunks that sleep. Yeah. I mean,
they do. I think they do actually think about it quite a lot, because that's what all that schooling is for you to think up new ways to justify that, like make people forget about the last thing.
That's
the whole goal
absolutely.
Is I read it in the Atlantic. I can't remember what story we were doing, but I looked up some story in the Atlantic about is it really bad to be a hypocrite? Because there's such hypocrites now, and it was all about like, but is hypocrisy really even? It's kind of like a lower class. I couldn't believe what I was reading.
Right.
But
took two people to write
Kurt.
this.
That's what you learn. You learn how to rationalize the inexcusable, how to defend the indefensible, how to twist the truth to fit not only a certain narrative, but a certain ethos, so that you pass that on to the next generation of worthy meritocratic do-gooders, right? And it goes on and on and on until there's nothing left because you pushed it too far, and that's what these times kind of feel like. Like we're on the eve of that.
Well, Mark.
So an American YouTuber, Gonzalo Lira, has died, unfortunately, in Ukrainian custody. His father emailed a few of us last week to break the horrific news. His father has appeared on this show a couple of times and has pled for the U.S. government to intervene in some way and to help Gonzalo Lira get out of Ukrainian custody. But the American administration pretty much ignored it. Now, Gonzalo Lira was in custody because of speaking about the Ukraine war. He was against NATO. He was against U.S. involvement in the war. He took the stance that this very similar stance to myself, similar stance to, Scott Ritter has come on this show and says the same things. Many of us have had the exact same stance and have said the exact same things as Gonzalo Lira. And that is what's so absolutely frightening about this, is that he did no different than what I have done on this show night after night after night. That is what Gonzalo Lira did. And Ukraine made it illegal to say those types of things while on Ukrainian soil. or anywhere. If I step foot in Ukraine, I would be potentially incarcerated. And they jailed him. They jailed him for speech, what we would call free speech in this country, our First Amendment right. They jailed Gonzalo Lira over that. Now, some people have a hard time believing this, and they think there is no way. He must have done something else. It is just beyond imagination for many people to believe that a country like Ukraine, many people supporting this country, would jail somebody over just telling things the way I tell on YouTube. He was a YouTuber. He made YouTube videos, and he said what he thought, and they jailed him for it. This is the email that I received from his father. A few of us received this. My son, Gonzalo Lira, died in a hospital in Kharkiv between 11 and 12 p.m. Ukraine time yesterday, January 11th, 2024. I cannot accept the way my son has died. He was tortured, extorted, incommunicado for 8 months and 11 days, and the U.S. Embassy did nothing to help my son. The responsibles of this tragedy is the dictator Zelensky, with the concurrence of a senile American president, Joe Biden. Please read his file enclosed from that kangaroo court hearing, and you will see that the charges were a political question, and Biden gave the green light to that bloody dictator to put my son in prison. My pain is unbearable. The world must know what is going on in Ukraine with that inhuman dictator Zelensky. If you believe in democracy and decency, make the world know what they have done to a decent and very intelligent man who predicted that Ukraine would never win a war against Russia and the financial punishments would backfire on the USA. Gonzalo Lira Sr. And that's all that Gonzalo Lira did, is he said, this is not a winnable war. Many of us said that. And guess what? It is not a winnable war. And now everyone's scrambling to try to figure out how they're going to end this war. How do they end this war and save face? And that's the type of stuff that Gonzalo Lira talked about on YouTube. He made YouTube videos. He was a YouTuber, and they jailed him, and now he's dead. Gonzalo Lira also sent us a photograph, an image of a handwritten note that Gonzalo Lira wrote, or he maybe had somebody at his bedside write. It's unclear, but this is a handwritten note. He says, tell my sister I have had double pneumonia as well as pneumothorax, plus a very severe case of edema, swelling of the body. All this started in mid-October, but was ignored by the prison. They only admitted that I had pneumonia at a December hearing. I'm about to have a procedure to reduce the edema pressure in my lungs, which is causing me extreme shortness of breath to the point of passing out after minimal activity or even just talking for 2 minutes. So he sent this email. This was a message that he'd sent January 4th, I believe. And then he was dead January 11th. So he suffered from pneumothorax, which is a collapsed lung. A collapsed lung can be a result from chest trauma. So it could have been beaten and ended up with a collapsed lung. It could also be some sort of excess pressure on the lungs, or it could be lung disease that causes it. COPD, asthma, cystic fibrosis, tuberculosis, whooping cough. There's various different things that could cause pneumothorax, the collapsed lung, but that is what he apparently died from, which is the pneumothorax and the edema pressure in his lungs, and it is just horrific. He apparently had indicated to his family that he was, like he said in this note, that it started in mid-October. He was getting sick in mid-October, but they ignored him. They didn't get him, he was incarcerated. They didn't get him any medical care, any medical treatment, and they finally got him admitted to the hospital when he went to a hearing in December. So that was 6 weeks or more, 6 to 8 weeks later is when they finally, or longer than that even, before they finally got him hospital care. And when you wait that long with something like that, it is fatal. And it was fatal for Gonzalo Lira. This is just, I think, for many of us, or for me, at least I should say, Julian Assange, the case of Julian Assange is frightening and comes with some serious dire consequences for journalism. If they convict Julian Assange for publishing government secrets, then all of journalism will be corrupted and afraid to ever publish government secrets. The government would love nothing more than that. Now that is an important case, and we followed that along, and we still are following that. And that, you know, that hits home in a way, because as somebody who wants to talk about government secrets, I don't want to be punished the way Julian Assange is being punished if I publish, let's say, a video that contains government secrets. That's very scary, right? So that's an important case. But I will say that this Gonzalo Lira case hits closer to home, because, you know, when I look at Julian Assange, I think, what are the chances I'm ever going to come across government secrets? You know, what are the chances someone's going to send me, you know, little old Kim Iverson, government secrets to bring forward on my show? I mean, it could happen.
Zelensky,
I certainly welcome it if somebody has whatever that needs to get out there to the public, that's important to the public to know about. But the chances of it are low. When I look at Gonzalo Lira, I think, I do this every day. I do this every day. And now he's dead. He was incarcerated. They took him away for doing exactly the same thing I do, exactly the same thing that many of the others that you watch do. So it's incredibly, incredibly frightening. It hits way closer to home that being, you know, a journalist, a YouTuber, a truth teller, an independent talker, whatever, however you want to label it, that this is a dangerous job. I mean, you wouldn't think it is. You wouldn't think it's a dangerous job. I certainly at times forget that it's a dangerous job, but I guess it's a dangerous job because people are out to get us. They don't want us to speak the truth. They don't want the masses to hear things. They don't want you to know the truth. That's really what it comes down to. It's not even about me. It's not about Gonzalo. It's not about any Julian Assange. It's not about the individual. It's about you, actually. It's about you. They don't want you to know the truth. That's what it is. They're afraid of you. And because they're afraid of you, they have to silence us because they're worried about the weapon we give you, which is information, knowledge. And they know that that weapon is more powerful than any other weapon that they could that you could have. And that is why they don't want you to have it. And that's why they go around silencing and punishing, because they're wanting to scare us. They're wanting to ensure that we never cross the line and give you those weapons. The weapons that could take down an empire, the weapons that cause revolutions, the weapons that expose corruption and get people angry and cause people to rise up and change their governments, or even just vote differently. They just don't want you to have that information. So Gonzalo Lira, he predicted that he would die in prison. This was July 31st. He had gotten out. He was incarcerated. Then they let him out on bail, essentially. And while he was out, he decided, I've got to run. I have to run or I'm going to die in prison. That's just the way it's going to be. Watch this video. It's it's terrible.
The start of the genesis of this whole situation is because I had an opinion that went against the narrative. And that's why I went to prison. And that's why, if I'm arrested again, I will die in prison. So I ask you, please, as many people as possible, the American State Department knows exactly who I am and the situation I'm currently involved in. And they know the fate that awaits me. They know it. You know, they have that saying that, I forget the wording exactly. You know, I'm a little stressed out, as you can imagine, but they have that saying that people are fundamentally good, but for evil to triumph, all you need is the indifference of good people. Please don't be indifferent to my fate. I ask you this very humbly. Please recognize that, well, the literal death that awaits me if this doesn't work out. Understand what's going on.
Well, he wasn't being melodramatic there. He was being serious, and he did die in incarceration by Ukraine. I want to fast forward to just a day after that, Ukraine had a spokesperson, Sarah Ashton Carrillo, if you remember. This person was basically gloating that they were going to hunt Gonzalo Lira down and capture him. Watch this.
Gonzalo Lira made the mistake of admitting that he thought about running away to the so-called Donetsk People's Republic or Luhansk People's Republic, as well as looking to running towards Russia. Gonzalo Lira also claims he wants political asylum. An innocent man would stand and face trial. Gonzalo Lira is not an innocent man. Gonzalo Lira is a criminal propagandist. Gonzalo Lira is not a journalist. But most importantly, after his admissions to having a desire to run towards Russia, to run towards the so-called Donetsk People's Republic and so-called Luhansk People's Republic, he then went west. But there's a reason you haven't heard from Gonzalo Lira yet with his so-called attempts at asylum in Hungary. It's because the state security services, better known as the SBU, are some of the most talented and focused law enforcement agents across the globe. And in doing so, they knew where Gonzalo Lira was most certainly every step of the way with his movements over the past 48 hours.
I mean, just disgusting. So they hunted him down. She's gloating about, he's looking for asylum in these other countries. He had every reason to look for asylum in those countries. Look what happened to him. And she says that, or he says, I don't know how they identify these days, or if it matters. He, I suppose, says that that Gonzalo Lira, an innocent person, an innocent man would stand trial and would allow themselves to be detained. Well, Gonzalo Lira never got his day in court. So he died before he could get there, and he knew that that's what would happen to him. He knew that they would beat him, they would torture him, that they would somehow off him and ensure that he just didn't get his day in court. And he didn't get his day in court. So it's not just about, I'm going to be tough, I'm going to be brave, and I'm going to stand my day in court. I'm going to go back and do that, and have my day. I mean, that you can't have your day if they don't let you have it. And that's what happened to Gonzalo Lira. I do want to point out that the Biden administration did absolutely nothing about this, continues to stay mum about Gonzalo Lira's death, even though now it is making some mainstream media news. I did see Newsweek put out a piece, Fox News put out a piece. There's been some outlets that have been reporting on his death. But I do want to roll back the clock here to May 28th, when the U.S. State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller was asked about Gonzalo Lira, and this is what he said.
Thanks, Liam Cosgrove with Epic Times. So this was a couple weeks ago, but I haven't seen an official statement on it. A U.S. citizen who was residing in Ukraine has been arrested, and that he was a California-born man. He was in the past like a Business Insider contributor, and he had a YouTube channel. He was an outspoken critic of Zelensky's regime. The Ukrainian SBU released a press release saying he was arrested for justifying Putin's invasion. So ultimately, it added up to speech. And I spoke with Congressman Ted Lieu, Democrat, and he said he urges the State Department to engage its authorities to, work out some sort of negotiation to get him released. So are you guys aware of this? How do we feel about our allies, detaining U.S. citizens for speech abroad?
I will say in general that we're aware of the report. We obviously support the exercise of freedom of speech anywhere in the world, and I'll leave it at that.
So you guys aren't working to get him released?
I'm going to leave my comments where I just left them. Callie.
Shameful, completely shameful. An American citizen detained for free speech dies in custody for free speech, over free speech. That's what he did wrong. He spoke. And now Gonzalo Lira is dead. WEF, the World Economic Forum 2024 Rebuilding Trust Summit that they're having in Davos as they all fly in on their private jets and talk about climate change and getting those little peons, that's you,
to reduce your carbon footprint as they all fly in on private jets, and how they want to return morality and ethics to society as they are hiring hookers for $700 to $1,500 a night. The reports coming out of Davos are wild. I mean, it's just like the biggest, showcasing of hypocrisy. And that's why people are so against it. And Klaus Schwab gets up there and says, oh, it's the libertarians causing us problems. Libertarians, oh no, they're against us. They want freedom. How dare they want freedom against government intrusion into their private lives? That's what Klaus Schwab has to say. Well, Zelensky was one who took part in the World Economic Forum. He's there now, and he's been chatting with various world leaders. He also spoke. While he's been speaking, now Klaus Schwab got up on stage and introduced Zelensky and said that there is no doubt that Ukraine is on the path to European integration, is what Klaus Schwab said when he introduced Zelensky at the meeting. And Zelensky had a couple of, watching his whole 30-minute speech, or it was like I think 15-minute speech that he kind of did a question and answer after that. And watching it, I have to say, it's kind of hard to understand Zelensky and what his point is. He's obviously, English is not his primary language. The speech has been translated. I don't know if it's coming across exactly the way he intends for it to. And I'm sure he doesn't know either, because English is not his native tongue. So how does he really know that it's not really coming across quite right? But there were a few things he said that stood out that I want to show you. One of the things he said was he was basically criticizing Europe, the West, and pointing at them and saying, how many of you could say that you could send soldiers to foreign countries for defense? It was unclear if he's saying, and I'll let you watch it and you decide. It's a little unclear if he's saying you need to start sending us people to fight in this war, or if he was saying, look at us, we're defending you because you wimpy Europeans, you wimpy Westerners are unwilling to actually provide troops for a battle. Watch this.
If anyone thinks this is only about us, this is only about Ukraine, they are fundamentally mistaken. Possible directions and even timeline of a new Russian aggression beyond Ukraine become more and more obvious. Let me ask very honestly, which European nation today can provide a combat-ready army on par with ours, holding back Russia? And how many men and women are your nation ready to send to defend another state, another nation?
Okay, so he's got kind of a good point. He's asking, how many of you have a combat ready? Are you combat ready? So here we are fighting against Russia, and you wimpy Europeans are over there. Many of you are just being defended by the United States. The UK, has a military, but it's mostly naval.
They weak.
France, France has a pretty significant military.
Weak.
So, the Germans, we demilitarize them, so they don't really have one. It's just NATO. NATO is the combined force over there. And he's right. NATO has not given him any troops at all. And really, this whole entire speech from Zelensky was interesting because, he's not saying, let's continue to fight. Let's continue to go forward with this. A lot of it, he was saying, it's now time for peace. It's now time to rebuild. We need you to help us rebuild. We need money for rebuilding, not necessarily money for weapons. He kind of criticizes the Europeans and says, you told us not to strike back. You were afraid that this was going to widen the war, increase escalations, or escalate tensions and widen the war. And so we didn't, but that was a mistake. He basically criticizes the West and says, I did everything you told me to do, and look at where I'm at. It's kind of the gist of what Zelensky had to say. And he has every right, I think, to be pretty perturbed that the West basically played him like a puppet. They were pulling his strings. I always use the wrong analogies. My dad's always like, you're combining him. So I think it's like played him like a fiddle, or like pulled the strings like a puppet, right? Either one, same thing. You get the idea. That's what they did to Zelensky. That's what the US, that's what NATO, that's what the UK, that's what the West did to Zelensky. They've been dangling, even before Zelensky, they've been dangling this idea of European inclusion to Ukraine, into the European Union for years and years and years. Oh, sure. We'll integrate you into the EU. Oh, sure. We'll bring you into NATO. Anyway, so about those corrupt business money laundering deals we're trying to do, can we keep doing those? Yeah, okay. Yeah, no, in the future, yeah, we'll let you in the EU. Don't worry. Anyway, about that money. That seems to be what has gone on, at least from from our vantage point. That's what it looks like. Zelensky has he did say that he wants the West to help him rebuild now. So this was kind of a difference. There were a lot of speakers talking about Ukraine at the WEF this last day who did talk about upping aid to Ukraine or criticizing the fact that the US and some of Europe have not put forward the money to Ukraine, any further money to Ukraine. So there was a lot of criticism by others. But Zelensky took kind of a different tone to this meeting, again, pointing the finger, kind of saying, done what you guys have said and look at where I'm at. And now he's saying, so we're going to have to rebuild. And I guess that means you and your money now needs to help us rebuild. Watch this.
The war will end with a just and stable peace. And I want you to be the part of this peace, starting from right now, to bring the peace closer. And we need you in Ukraine to build, to reconstruct, to restore our lives. Each of you can be even more successful with Ukraine. And these days, right here in such beautiful country, in Switzerland, we have made a key political contribution to the possibility of ending the war. There was the most representative meeting of national security advisors regarding the implementation of the peace formula. More than 80 countries and international institutions were represented. Yesterday, I had very productive negotiation with the president of Switzerland and discussing the possibility of holding a summit at the leaders level in Switzerland. The first summit, the Global Peace Summit. Today, our teams have already begun work on organization such a summit, not the World War III, but the Global Peace Summit. And I invite every leader and country that respects peace and international law to join us.
Okay, so he also met with Antony Blinken, did have a sit-down meeting with him. Let's watch what they had to say.
Thanks so much. Well, I'm not sure who's hosting. It's so good to see you, all of our colleagues, and I just want to start by conveying President Biden's strong, enduring support for Ukraine. This at a time when you continue to face an almost daily onslaught from Russia, attacking infrastructure, attacking civilians, and we see that every day, but we also see the incredible courage and resilience of the Ukrainian people, the courage and resilience of your security forces. We're determined to sustain the support of Ukraine and work very closely with Congress in order to do that.
Yeah, I tell you what, right now, I think that Zelensky is probably going to turn into enemy number one to the West. That would be my guess. I mean, how could he not? How could he not turn into enemy number one? Not that the US or the West would demonize Zelensky, but it would be the other way around. I mean, here's a guy that was told, this is what you've got to do. We've got your back no matter what. We're in it to end. We're in it to win it. We're going to push Russia back. Don't you worry. Don't you worry. And so Zelensky goes forward, destroying his country, sacrificing many of his civilians. An entire generation of young men have been just pretty much dilapidated in the country. And all he's getting is lip service of like, oh yeah, one day, again, the same old bullcrap he's been hearing for years, which is, oh yeah, one day we'll integrate you into the EU. One day we'll put you into NATO, as they swear in as Sweden and Finland right away. I mean, what a slap in the face. And then now he's asking for money to rebuild. He's like, okay, so now he's calling for a peace summit. He's been wanting, while he's there, he says he wants a peace summit of some sort. He wants to, he's wanting to end this thing. Clearly he realizes, okay, they're not going to give us any more military support. They're not going to send boots on the ground. I mean, if you're in his position and you're thinking, well, they say they're in it to the end. They're really staunch on this. They're giving me a lot of money and weapons right now. They'll probably eventually send troops. That's what you would kind of think if you were in his position. But of course, you and I knew better. We knew that that was never going to happen. And it didn't happen. We were not going to send troops. And of course, the American people grew weary of continuing to send money to Ukraine in a war that they clearly are going to lose. We don't want another never-ending war like in Afghanistan where it just siphons off American resources. We just don't want that. So you and I knew, but Zelensky didn't know, and the Ukrainian people didn't know, and now they're starting to get that as a real, like, being doused with ice water. And then he's going to the World Economic Forum and he's begging for money. And guess what? That's not going to result in anything good, because it's not like the US is just going to give him, or the West is going to give him money to rebuild out of the goodness of our hearts. We're not going to give it away. No, it's going to be big businesses going in there, owning everything and siphoning off the resources from the Ukrainian people, ensuring that all of the money just goes to wealthy American oligarchs, essentially, and European oligarchs. That's where the money's going to go. So they traded. At the end of the day, what they're going to realize is they traded one oligarchy for another oligarchy. They went from Russian oligarchs who were in Ukraine and influencing their political system to American and Western oligarchs who are going to go into Ukraine and rebuild and say, but this is mine, not really yours. We're the ones making all the money off of it. Oh, boo-hoo for you. And oh, by the way, we're going to meddle in your political system. And so it's just a trade-off. The only difference is he doesn't really speak English that well, but he speaks Russian. So would you rather have, if you're Ukrainian, who many of them are Russian speakers, Zelensky, his first language, his native language is Russian. Ukrainian is his second tongue. English, clearly not that great. So at least he would have been able to speak to the people who are and it's a neighbor, a border neighbor. You share a border, you share a culture, your cousins, you share language, you share people. I mean, if you're going to be under the influence of an oligarch, that's an oligarchy or a corrupt government that's going to come in and siphon your resources and run the show, you would think that you'd want to at least understand their language. That would just go back to basics. So I just think that in the end, the United States is, I mean, Zelensky looks weary. He's pointing the finger a lot in these kind of like backhanded jabs. And I do think that he's ultimately, we're creating enemy number one. This is how they turn. This is how it happens. They say, I thought you were my friend, and it turns out you weren't. So I wouldn't be surprised if in a few years, Ukraine cuddles back up with Russia and just really starts to hate the United States. I wouldn't be surprised by that.
The situation of the armed forces of Ukraine in Avdiivka is worsening by the hour. Today, on January 17th, the commander of the Tavria Group, General Alexander Tarnavsky, officially announced that the Russian army had switched to active offensive operations in the Avdiivka direction. According to him, the Russians have significantly increased the number of offensive actions in the southeast and north of Avdiivka. Moreover, the active work of Russian combat aviation in this direction of the front has not stopped for the last 48 hours. According to General Tarnavsky, on January 17th, more than 40 sorties of Russian combat aircraft and about 60 attempts of offensive actions by Russian tank units were recorded. By the way, this Ukrainian general has already been called the biggest loser of the current war, since he managed to fail all the tasks assigned to him on the Avdiivka and Zaporizhia directions of the front. This general is very lucky that he lives in the 21st century. For such setbacks and failures, generals were shot on the spot in the 1940s of the last century. Meanwhile, commenting on the situation in the Avdiivka direction of the front, war correspondents noted the huge number of aerial bombs used by Russian combat aviation against the positions of the armed forces of Ukraine. The big problems created by Russia's gliding aerial bombs were also noted by the mayor of Avdiivka, Vitaly Barabash. According to him, over the past 2 weeks, Russia has used about 300 aerial bombs in the Avdiivka direction. For comparison, from February 2022 to December 2023, Russia used only 150 aerial bombs. Thus, based on these figures, it becomes clear that since the beginning of 2024, Russia has begun to use gliding aerial bombs in non-stop mode. At the same time, the mayor of Avdiivka noted that the armed forces of Ukraine are absolutely powerless against these aerial bombs, since Russian planes launch them from a long distance, which is why they cannot be shot down with the help of air defense systems. In addition, the rotation of Russian troops has also begun to be observed along the entire perimeter of the Avdiivka front. Moreover, Ukrainian military expert Konstantin Mashevets admitted that the Ukrainian armed forces most likely were forced to completely leave the village of Stepovoy, north of Avdiivka. According to him, Russian troops also managed to make significant progress in the area of the Avdiivka coke plant. In general, watching what is happening north of Avdiivka, it becomes clear that the Russians are preparing to completely destroy the Avdiivka coke plant, this powerful stronghold, which was created by the British military for 9 years. The Russian military command understands perfectly well that until the stronghold of the armed forces of Ukraine in the Avdiivka coke plant falls, the Ukrainian army will continue to resist in the city itself. And judging by the reports of the war correspondents, the Russians are indeed preparing to wipe out this coke plant from the face of the earth. According to them, the most powerful non-nuclear aerial bomb, WW3, capable of destroying even anti-nuclear bunkers, was spotted in the Avdiivka direction. Let me remind you that it was after the use of this aerial bomb against the Azovstal plant in Mariupol that the nationalists from the Azov battalion raised the white flag and surrendered. And apparently, the Avdiivka coke plant will very soon share the fate of Azovstal. Meanwhile, on the night of January 17, Russia launched another massive missile attack on Ukraine. This time, heavy cruise missiles of various types and jet-powered uranium kamikaze drones hit dozens of targets in Kharkiv, Odessa, and Kryvyi Rog. In particular, the buildings of Kharkiv University and the private Ashera clinic were destroyed in Kharkiv. As it turned out, the command of the armed forces of Ukraine held regular meetings in these buildings, and also deployed foreign mercenaries along with militants of nationalist formations. According to sources in the Russian military department, 20 high-ranking officers of the armed forces of Ukraine, 200 foreign mercenaries, and 150 Ukrainian nationalists were killed during this missile attack. Moreover, warehouses in Odessa and Nikolaev were discovered and destroyed, where components for the repair of Western armored vehicles, including barrels for artillery guns and tanks, were stored. In addition, a radar station belonging to the air defense system NASAMS was also discovered and destroyed in the city of Kryvyi Rog, near the local airfield.
Nice to see you back. Welcome to Rising. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Robbie Suave, and this is Brianna Joy Gray. We don't introduce ourselves every day. I think they know who we are by now.
We're a big family at this point.
That is certainly what it feels like. All right, let's get straight into the show. First off, New Atlanta Journal-Constitution polling shows President Biden trailing former President Trump in Georgia by a whopping 8 points. Meanwhile, 19% of respondents say they hadn't decided yet between the two. Since the AJC's last polling just 2 months ago, Biden has dropped 7 percentage points in the Peach State.
ABC polling released last week finds just 33% of the country approves of Joe Biden's job performance thus far, a record low for his presidency and for any president in the last 15 years. Worse for Biden, just 28% of respondents said they believed he has the, quote, mental sharpness to serve another 4 years. Even rapper Meek Mill weighed in. He was flamed on Twitter yesterday for stating what many Americans are clearly already thinking. He wrote, "Joe Biden is too old to be our president. Respectfully, WTF is going on in the American system that y'all are pushing this through like it's okay to trust what we're seeing. We're talking missiles, advanced technology, mental and physical warfare. That's not a lane for the older." Meanwhile, Vice President Kamala Harris made her case for another 4 years during a one-on-one with ABC News this week. Let's watch.
Obviously can't change the president's age. So what is your plan to try and change this perception? How do you do that?
I'll tell you the reality of it is, and I spent a lot of time with President Biden, be it in the Oval Office, in the Situation Room, and other places. He is extraordinarily smart. He has the ability to see around the corner in terms of what might be the challenges we face as a nation or globally.
But it doesn't seem that that's getting out and resonating with Americans, with a lot of your supporters. How do you cut through that and make sure that they're seeing the Joe Biden that you were just describing?
Well, I mean, listen, you're here with me in South Carolina. You saw every room we went in, the numbers of people who are there applauding quite loudly. And they're applauding for me and they're applauding for Joe Biden.
What's incredible is that the answer to that question, how you get voters to see a different side of Joe Biden or more of Joe Biden or your perspective on Joe Biden, would be to have a Democratic primary. If for the last 8 months, Joe Biden had been on debate stages, doing town halls, interacting with the public, and having to distinguish himself and his views from the other candidates in the field the same way Republicans have been doing, then we'd have some sense of the man and perhaps a different perspective on his stamina and his ability to lead. But Democrats have put themselves in a situation where they not only shut down a primary, they changed the debate schedule, didn't put Joe Biden on the ballot in New Hampshire, trying to disqualify the state altogether, and then now are looking around confused as to why voters have no idea who this guy is and are easily persuaded by the worst version of him that obviously the conservative media is going to put out there. They really did seem to make their own bet on this one.
Yeah, it would sharpen him. It would help him to participate. The same is true for Donald Trump, obviously, who has refused to do any of the debates. I think, frankly, Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis have gotten better every time they've had to do it. In their last debate, where it was just the two of them arguing, was some of the most substantive criticism of each other and actually, frankly, of Donald Trump, which they need to do. So there's no reason not to participate. And it's just, again, another strategic blunder on Democrats' part that they have not subjected him to this process at a time where their voters are clearly saying they're at least interested in exploring alternatives. Then if you give them alternatives and they say, no, we're actually sticking with Joe Biden, well, then at least you've run that experiment. But why you would not do that when poll after poll shows him down nationally and shows him down in the key swing states, including Georgia. So now he's 8 points down in Georgia, a state that in the 2020 election flipped red to blue. And then in the 2022 midterms, and then immediately following the election, the both Senate seats flipped blue during those special elections that were held there. In 2022, one of those seats was successfully held and defended by Democrats. This was becoming a state that, even to the extent it was interested in Republicans, it was specifically interested in non-Trump Republicans. Its governor, Brian Kemp, Republican governor, had his standoff with Trump over the election, stuck to principles, was attempted to be forced out by Trump, didn't happen. It remains very popular, but otherwise becoming a Democratic state, a blue state. And now you see that voters that Biden's 8 points down in that state, a state he needs to win. He needs to win it. He needs to win Arizona. He needs to win either Pennsylvania or Michigan, something like that. These are all places where voters are showing signs of fatigue with the Biden administration.
Yeah, and I will note that in some ways this is not surprising. I remember listening to interviews with election workers, door knockers, people who were working to turn folks out for the Democratic Party in the wake of 2020. And what they clearly said is that we used all of our political capital on this race. Joe Biden told us that we needed Georgia. Joe Biden told us that we needed Georgia to win the Senate. And we came through and we sold his promises. We talked about stimulus checks. We talked about student debt cancellation. We talked about specifically Biden's promise to cancel all HBCU debt. Georgia is a hub for 3 major HBCUs. And we don't have anything left. If he betrays these promises, we cannot in good faith convince people to come out for him because it was such a reach in the first instance. Biden in 2020 was a candidate that was an alternative to Trump, not an entity in and of itself that people were enthusiastic about. And now I do think that that the Democratic Party should not take lightly that the organizations, the voter groups, people like Black Voters Matter and the like, who did so much of the work on the ground to make sure that people turn out to the polls, simply either are not going to have that same interest in doing so or are just not going to have the same ability to say, hey, this guy is going to make your life better because now he has to defend his record over the last 3 years.
They seem, they being the Democratic Party, seems confident that, well, Trump's going to be the nominee. He'll be front and center again. And that will remind, and we'll just remind voters of how racist and sexist and anti-immigrant he is. And what you want? This is what you want? You want fascism? No, you don't. You're going to vote for Joe Biden. That seems to be their strategy.
And I think,
and at a time where actually, like cable, as we've commented on yesterday, cable news has like stopped even showing things. They think Trump, the things that Trump says are so beyond the pale, they can't even show them to viewers, which is going to actually complicate making that case. If you're too afraid to actually show people what Donald Trump has to say for himself, that's actually going to protect him from criticism. It's the most backward thinking strategy ever. Of course, it's the one embraced by CNN and MSNBC, but that's a little bit of a digression, but it's interesting.
I think that's right. And I also think that there has to be an acknowledgement that these are not kind of superficial whims. The voters in Georgia who work so hard for voter turnout, they're not people who are saying, well, Joe Biden is old, therefore I'm not interested in him anymore. They're people who have been substantively disappointed by Biden reneging on his own agenda. Democrats are hoping that people will simply forget about a lot of these agenda items, and some of them they very may well. If this were just a standoff between whether abortion rights versus student debt were going to win, I'd say Biden has a solid chance of convincing people that the former is more important than the betrayal on the latter. But Gaza has really thrown an unforeseen monkey wrench into the machinery here. And when you look at states like Michigan with their large Arab populations, and you look at the thousands and thousands of voters who are saying, not only am I not going to vote for Biden today, he is now irredeemable in my eyes because this is not an abstraction. This is not about my financial security. This is something like student debt, for example, or the PRO Act not passing or the $15 minimum wage not passing. This is about the fact that people I know and love on the other side of the world have been killed and are never coming back. That's not something you forget about. And his indifference to the real hurt and pain of his base. 80% of Democrats want there to be a ceasefire, and him acting as though those people are frankly terrorists for wanting that outcome in a foreign policy context is, I think, really going to hurt him.
Week, and instead of trying to figure out why did he win so handily, why do so many people who could be viewers of our show, right, this is the media speaking, instead they're just insulting them, saying if you voted for Trump, you're stupid, you don't live on planet Earth, also you're selfish and you're probably a white Christian male, and that inherently makes you selfish. It's pretty amazing. Now I say this,
and racist.
Yes, that goes without saying.
Yeah.
I say this as a former card-carrying member of the liberal media who also myself was very shocked and disappointed when Trump won in 2016. And I remember feeling like, oh, did the media give him too much time? Was it our fault as the media, right? Instead of thinking, what do these people see in him? What does he give them, right? Instead of having any humility about what other people think, they're thinking, well, we know better, but these people are just too stupid. And it's infuriating to watch it. Watch Rachel Maddow say that what we are seeing here is the rise of authoritarianism. And she says it with a straight face. She means it.
And the big picture takeaway from that, and I don't mean to be, again, too dark, as you said, on this, but it is not, if we are worried about the rise of authoritarianism in this country, we are worried about potential rise of fascism in this country. If we're worried about our democracy falling to an authoritarian and potentially fascist form of government, the leader who is trying to do that is part of that equation. But people wanting that is a much bigger part of that equation. Right. And the American electorate is made up of two major parties. One of those parties has been flirting with extremism on the ultra-right for a very long time. They've brought them in a way that they haven't been central to Republican electoral politics ever before, and I know because I've been studying this. But once you have radicalized one major party so that those are the preferences of the people who adhere to your party, the leader's interchangeable. And yes, Trumpism is sometimes what we call it. MAGA movement is probably a better way to do it. But there is an authoritarian movement inside Republican politics that isn't being bamboozled by Trump. They are pushing Trump to get more and more extreme, because the more extreme things he says, the more they adhere to him. And that is coming from a very large proportion of the American right that adheres to the Republican Party. And that's why this is a Republican Party problem more than it is the problem of one man and his leadership.
So what a crock of shit. And what the hell, what is she talking about? Give me specifics, Rachel Maddow. How is the Republican Party pushing Trump to be more radical, more extreme? And what does it mean to be extreme and radical? Is not allowing 10 to 15,000 people per day to pour across the southern border radical?
Well,
what is radical?
I can tell you, because I watched her almost every day during the Trump administration, and I know what she told me was wrong with Trump was Russiagate. She didn't apologize for that. Was the fact that he was going to steal the 2020 election, and that he would not leave office peacefully. None of those things ended up being true, and that he was connected to Russia. Those are the things. No, she doesn't have anything. She's still running those hits, right?
Right, but what are the hits? I guess I don't know what, because Russiagate, the fact that she's even allowed to be on the air
after Russiagate, right?
After Russiagate, which she pushed every day on her freaking show.
For 4 years. Every day I was waiting for Trump to get arrested for what she was
like, it's today's the
about
day.
Every day.
Remember that day she held up a piece of paper and she's like, I've got the paper.
It was his tax return.
She's like, today's the day.
Yeah.
But anyway, today, what I'm talking about is now. Like, what now do they have? When they want to call Trump extreme, what specifically are they citing? They have nothing. They can't point to anything. Oh,
well, they're hanging their hat on January 6th. So I listened to a couple episodes of Pod Save America this week because I want to know how the liberal media is covering this. And they say that, Vivek Ramaswamy and Nikki Haley, because, well, I don't know if Nikki Haley says this, but because they say that there's some fishy stuff about January 6th, that makes them extremists. You have to just take January 6th as a spoonful of medicine, that it was only bad people in a bad insurrection. None of them were provoked, that it was completely an attempt to overturn our democracy. You have
to cry like an MSNBC anchor who's just so upset about it.
Yeah.
You have to
lack curiosity on why some of the tapes don't support that. You have to lack curiosity on why some people who were even journalists, like Brandon Straka, were arrested for not doing anything, why prosecutions are so uneven. You can't say anything like that. And so that's sort of what they're saying, is that Trump's an extremist because of January 6th, even though he's not been convicted of anything in connection with that.
Or if you don't want trans ideology pushed on your children in schools, right? You don't want.
That's not necessarily a Trump platform at this moment.
Well, he's he's spoken out against this type of thing in our schools. He's certainly spoken out against he did a whole speech about 8 months ago where he released it on Truth Social or wherever it was at the time. And he specifically talked about not allowing the government to push these, trans surgeries and body mutilation of children. That's extreme. Like stopping our children from having their bodies mutilated by that kind of. So maybe that's the extremism she's talking about. And closing our southern border is extreme.
Now, I would like to have a little conversation with the chat, because with you in the comments, I find it so interesting that when I see things like this, I think to myself, if these were my colleagues and, they're at least my contemporaries, I would say you should apologize for what you did during COVID. You should apologize for what you did during Russiagate. You should apologize for how you unevenly cover these politicians, one political party over another. Every time I say that, we get so many comments that say, no apology. We don't accept that. No apology, they should go to jail. And I'm so interested in whether or not there's any redemption for people like this who, once they just read a few books or open up their curiosity cells of their brain, is there any redemption or just no? What do you think?
Well, I think that's a good question. I mean, if they're just a casual person on the street who, changed their opinion because they got educated and they were awakened and they learned about something that's different. But if you're Rachel Maddow, who every day was driving a certain narrative and encouraging you to go, and she was calling you stupid for not getting a vaccine. She was, they were pushing this narrative. They had doctors on their shows. They had Fauci on their show every day, pushing a certain narrative.
Yeah.
And now we know the effects of it and how detrimental it's been. Like, why is Dr. Fauci able to go to Washington Nationals games? Why isn't he locked up? Why isn't he behind bars at this point?
Yeah.
So if Fauci just comes out and says, I'm sorry,
right,
and how many millions of people died as a result of that, it's like if Hitler came out and apologized.
Yes. But I was uppity, sort of like this at one point too. I was a useful idiot for a while, so I can say I'm sorry, right? But I never told anyone how to live.
Exactly, that's the difference. You can have different opinions and learn something. I'm talking about Rachel Maddow or these other people who were pushing things like Dr. What's his name from Pfizer, who was on CNBC all the damn time.
Albert Bourla.
Well, he's the CEO.
No, Scott Gottlieb.
These guys they were telling parents to go out and do this on a regular basis, to go out and get triple boosted, quadruple boosted. So if they just come out and say, I'm sorry, but it'd be interesting to hear members of parliament or members of government or the United States Congress. I think we did have, Philip, correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't we have wasn't there like one member of like the, I don't know, Irish Parliament or somebody that came out and apologized? It was like the first and only person to apologize for anything.
And Vivek Ramaswamy has said, I wish I had done things differently as well. I wish I hadn't taken the COVID vaccine.
But that's his personal choice to have done that, right? I'm talking about things that someone has done that's killed people or hurt people. Anyway, we're off on a tangent.
We are, because I'm so curious when I get these comments in YouTube say no apology. And I kind of chuckle to myself, but I want you to know that I read them. I think it's so interesting when she's talking about this hypothetical authoritarian leader that she lacks understanding of the fact that we have one right now. The Biden administration censored speech online. It's taking it to the Supreme Court so they can keep doing it about the pandemic. They prosecute political opponents the way Rachel Maddow told me that Trump did for years.
Told all of us.
Yeah, I feel like she said it to me. I'm very personally offended by Rachel Maddow. He protects his family from due process and currently is under impeachment proceedings for foreign interference peddling. Any of this done by Trump would send MSNBC ablaze. But they're more worried about Trump, and that's very disingenuous. Maybe they're really concerned about Trump is just, I don't know. He needs to apologize. I don't know what they want from him, right? To apologize and mea culpa. Here is a political pundit on GB News saying that the people who vote for Trump don't even believe in reality. They're just off on another planet. She says they're not on Earth 1. They're so stupid.
I think if America goes into autocracy, that's not just bad for Democrats. That's bad for Britain. That's bad for the United States. That's bad for Mexico and Canada and everyone else. So I think we should all be really worried. I think Trump has this nomination locked up. I don't think it's even going to be a contest. I think if Nikki Haley had come in first or even second, she might have had a chance. But fundamentally, the math is not mathing, right? Trump is not going away. He has a base. It continues to shrink, but it is galvanized and it is passionate and they believe in their guy and they don't necessarily even believe in a lot of the realities that we on Earth One believe in.
What is the
reality?
That to me, that just reeks of Hillary Clinton saying basket of deplorables. Like these people that voted for Trump are literally on a whole other planet. They operate in a whole other universe from us here in real Earth.
Right.
That's what that reads to me.
They don't believe in science. Clearly, they don't believe in January 6th.
They don't believe in Gay Pride Week.
Censorship. They don't believe in I don't know.
They don't believe like a month-long celebration of I don't know, whatever. I mean, whatever choice liberals have this month, that now it's trans month. Oh, they don't believe in that? They must live on a whole other planet.
Right. Different realities. Here is Joy Reid from MSNBC accusing Iowa of racism and sexism, saying that otherwise Nikki Haley would have won, but she had the deck stacked against her because she's a brown lady.
New Hampshire. And I think to the point that you made, Steph, I mean, it's the elephant in the room. She's still a brown lady that's got to try to win in a party that is deeply anti-immigrant and which accepts the notion that you can say immigrants are poisoning the blood of our country. She's getting, birthered by Donald Trump. And I don't care how much the donor class likes her, which will ramp up a lot, the better she does in New Hampshire. So it's still a challenge. I don't see how she becomes the nominee of that party with Donald Trump still around. I can't picture it happening. Maybe it could happen. Ron DeSantis' only argument for staying in it is he's the white guy, that he can still make the appeal to white evangelists.
While we have
That's interesting. What do black people have blonde hair?
No, I don't know.
Why is she coloring her hair like a white person?
Cultural appropriation.
I'm just curious. That just struck me, like she's very much worried about the brownness of Nikki Haley, and yet she's coloring her hair blonde. I don't know. I'm just curious about that.
Well, she can color her hair any way she wants. It's the words that are repugnant that she's saying. Barack Obama won Iowa, so Iowa wasn't all that racist in 2008, right? It's
also ridiculous that she's saying that Donald Trump is birthering her. Where's your birth certificate, Nikki Haley? He doesn't have to really say anything about her at all. In fact, she's the one who shot herself in the foot with her affiliations. And of course, now all of these Democratic donors, the money that's poured in from Democratic donors for Nikki Haley, that people could see right through that.
Well, I think we should have learned this from Hillary Clinton, and we should have learned this from Lloyd Austin, that when we celebrate someone's race and gender, we miss the glaring fact that they are warmongers. And, we can argue about the fact that, Hillary Clinton, it was sexism. Maybe it was for some people, but it wasn't part of the conversation, how many people she had killed. Nikki Haley is a disingenuous warmonger who just happens to be a brown lady. So maybe people had their pulse on that, their finger on the pulse of that.
Could be.
She kept going. She said that white Christians are really the problem. And it's a problem basically that they even vote. Watch this.
But, I feel like the important sort of data point, and Steve talks about it a lot. He's going to probably talk about it a little more tonight, is that these are white Christians. That this is a state that is overrepresented by white Christians that are going to participate in these caucuses, especially tonight. Earlier today, reached out to Robbie Jones from the Public Religion Research Institute, knowing that we were going to talk about Iowa. And this is a hyper evangelical white state. And he said the following to me: Iowa is about 61% white Christian. The country as a whole is approximately 41% white Christian. And in Iowa, we're talking about evangelical white Christians. And he said the following, because I asked him, what do they get out of supporting Donald Trump? Because he keeps losing, he keeps delivering losses and losses and losses. And he said the following: they see themselves as the rightful inheritors of this country, and Trump has promised to give it back to them. All the things that we think about electability, about, what are people gaming out, or none of that matters when you believe that God has given you this country, that it is yours, and that everyone who is not a white conservative Christian is a fraudulent American, is a less real American. Then you don't care about electability. You care.
Okay, so they're only voting because they believe that they have rights as citizens. They believe the song, "This land is your land. This land is my land."
Right. No, white people are the problem in Iowa. And they are, as she pointed out, overrepresented. They are hyper represented in Iowa.
Mm-hmm. And even though Trump keeps losing, what is it that he's been losing? Because I thought last night was a win.
Yeah. She's like, oh, yeah, he keeps losing his base. And Maddow said, yeah, his base is withering. Okay. Well,
Even David Axelrod, Obama's campaign advisor last night, realized Trump is running a pretty tight ship. Even Pod Save America had admitted that he's running a really organized campaign. And they went to Eric Trump's speech and they're like, he gave a good speech. He really connects with people. What's going on here? And instead of saying, what have I missed over my last 8 years of being uppity and thinking I know everything, instead of saying that, they just continue to punch down and talk down to people. Watch how they think that they can change the reality by just not naming Donald Trump. Watch how Rachel Maddow, she doesn't even say his name like it's Voldemort, because she thinks she has the moral high ground, and they're telling us they won't show his victory speech.
I'm sorry, I just have to do a little bit of business just for a second. At this point in the evening, the projected winner of the Iowa caucuses has just started giving his victory speech. We will keep an eye on that as it happens. We will let you know if there's any news made in that speech, if there's anything noteworthy, something substantive and important. The reason I'm saying this is, of course, there is a reason that we and other news organizations have generally stopped giving an unfiltered live platform to remarks by former President Trump. It is not out of spite. It is not a decision that we relish. It is a decision that
yes, it is.
Regularly revisit. And honestly, earnestly, it is not an easy decision, but there is a cost to us as a news organization of knowingly broadcasting untrue things. That is the fundamental truth of our business and who we are. And so his remarks tonight will not air here live. We will monitor them and let you know about any news that he makes.
Now,
so
that makes me want to punch the screen, that we can't air lies. Joe Biden can say them with impunity. How many times did you say that the Hunter Biden story was not legitimate?
Yeah.
How many times, right, did you say things about the COVID pandemic that were not true, allow Dr. Fauci unlimited airtime to tell untruths, and this situation
and Russiagate every night on your show?
But since the war in Ukraine, right now, that's still going on. They say lies about the war right now still. And so she's saying it's unconscionable for us because too often he lies. We'll watch the speech, they say. And if he says anything we think you should know, so we will be the arbiters, we will be the middleman, right? And then if he says anything we want you to hear from that, we will tell you that. But otherwise, we don't want you to hear it.
Right. But they can air President Biden's speeches where he says the greatest threat to the United States of America are MAGA white extremists. Never mind the fact that we have rampant drugs pouring across our border and fentanyl crisis. You see the videos of people laying on the streets of Philadelphia or all over California, or thousands of people pouring across the border into the United States. But the greatest threat to America, MAGA white extremists, they can let that play on MSNBC without a problem at all.
Right. Lie after lie after lie. I mean, if you did a shot every time they told a lie about the war in Ukraine, right, you'd be dead by now. Right. I don't think any journalism school worth its salt would say, yeah, that was a good call. You can't give Trump, airtime because he's a liar.
And
I for one am relieved to know that the media is stepping up to just to consume all of the information and then just give me what I need to know.
Yes.
Because I want it filtered through Rachel Maddow for sure.
But see, I guess I look at this, I'm a glass half full kind of guy. I'm a positive person. Does that bother you?
No, I'm just giving you a fake smile.
So what I think about this is, well, we don't need them. Who's watching MSNBC anyway? And so if MSNBC is like, we've decided here at MSNBC that we're not going to air a Trump speech. He's like, well, here's a big middle finger. I'm going to go over to X, or formerly Twitter, and we're going to stream our acceptance speech here in Iowa, or our victory speech here in Iowa, and tens of millions of people are going to watch it. More people are watching Bluey on PBS right now than are watching Rachel Maddow on MSNBC. So this is the death of mainstream media. Jake Tapper, CNN, did the same exact thing.
Yes, they did.
So they're not off the hook either. Who's watching these networks? No one is watching them anymore.
And what they did instead was play Nikki Haley's second place speech. They chose not to play Vivek Ramaswamy's concession speech, where he decided to drop out of the race, probably because he endorsed and was favorable to Trump.
As I've said since the beginning, there are two America First candidates in this race. And earlier tonight, I called Donald Trump to tell him that I congratulate him on his victory. And now going forward, he will have my full endorsement for the presidency. And I think we're going to do the right thing for this country.
Now,
and then, by the way, Trump came out later and specifically went out of his way to thank Vivek and said he ran a great campaign, and he went out of his way to point out Vivek's, did a really great job and has elevated the conversation.
Now, look, I'm not here to endorse Trump. I'm not here to endorse any candidate. That's not my place in your life as your local neighborhood journalist, right? Here I am telling you that the media is doing you wrong. This is not how it's taught in journalism school. This is not how it should be on any public broadcast. They should not be making these decisions, and they certainly should not be deciding which lies they think they need to blow up and which lies they decide to sweep under the rug and buy or sell you or anything like that. And I think in the wake of the 2016 election, a lot of the liberal media and sort of East Coast media elites all looked at themselves and said, oh, we did this. We got Trump elected. It's because we gave them too much power, the Trump campaign, which is interesting because they already were giving themselves credit as if they can only let people through, right? So they're just lack self-awareness about the fact that, like, oh, well, this time we're going to get it right. This time we won't give him airtime. This time we're going to suppress him. It's no wonder that people hate them, right? I find this odious. As someone who still believes in journalism, until they apologize for all the lies that they continue to tell, we can't let them censor truth. I want to never hear from these people again.
That's a good way. That's a good way to end this. I never want to hear from these people again.
What's up, y'all? Gerald here, creator of Gospel Chops and your host for this YouTube channel, back with another video. Now, if you follow my main channel, then you heard me say at the end of last year, I thought there were going to be some problems in 2024 because it's an election year. And you know how people get in election year. We all run to our corners and situations get so thick that it could be brother against brother, friend against friend. Black against white, gay against straight. You know how it goes. But I predicted this because I sensed it in my spirit that the political climate was getting out of control and reaching a boiling point. Well, here we are 1 week into the year, and the Democrats have rolled out the old heads, y'all. The congressional Black Caucasians. Yes, that's right. They resorted to the old playbook. And when I say old, I mean old. This man here is older than the president. We know that the president can't handle himself. Acts like he doesn't know what day of the week it is. This man here, Mr. James Fish Fry Clyburn from South Carolina. They done rolled out the fish fry man, y'all. And this is why when I talk to young people, I always go hard and tell them to train. And whatever it is you want to be, make sure you train. You study. Make sure you know that thing like the back of your hand, because when we get in situations where things get tight and we don't have time to think, we revert to our training. And what are the Democrats doing in this tight situation? As 2024 has kicked off, they reverted to the old playbook. Let's bring out the old congressional Black Caucasians and have them rally the Black vote. Sorry, y'all, not this time. There's a new generation rising up, and we ain't voting for that Democrat plantation that our parents voted for to their own detriment. That ain't us. We've learned. We know better. And when you know better, you do better. Let's check out this video of James Fish Fry Clyburn addressing some concerns and questions that were thrown at him by the CNN host about the black vote in 2024. Check it out, y'all. Wrong video. Sorry, y'all. Let's try that again. Check it out.
Former President Obama met for a private lunch with President Biden recently to express concern about how Biden is managing his reelection bid. This comes as President Biden is struggling to solidify support among black voters, including on that trip to South Carolina. Obviously, you were instrumental in Biden getting the Democratic nomination. Obviously, black voters were instrumental in President Biden getting, then Senator Biden, or then Vice President Biden, getting the nomination in 2020. How worried are you about black voters showing up for President Biden in November?
Well, I'm not worried. I'm very concerned. And I have sat down with President Biden. I don't know. I saw those reports. I've also seen at least one report indicating that I have sat down with President Biden, and I did with him. And I've told him what my concerns are. I have no problem with the Biden administration and what it has done. My problem is that we have not been able to break through that MAGA wall in order to get to people exactly what this president has done.
Wow, Mr. Fish Fry, you have no problem whatsoever with what this administration has done, with the situation it has put the black community in, with record energy prices, record gas prices, record food prices. Wow. These are your elected officials, y'all, folks who've been sitting in Congress for decades. We ain't listening to these clowns no more, because we understand what we need politically, economically, socially. We know what we need in order to better our situation, and y'all ain't been providing it to us, Mr. Fish Fry. So I don't think we're going to vote for your candidate this time. And for the record, I am a registered independent. A lot of y'all like to call me MAGA and right wing and Republican. I ain't none of that. I think for myself. I do what's best for myself and my family. That's why I voted for Donald Trump twice. And before you jump off the ledge and call me all sorts of names, I also voted for Barack Obama twice. Because at the time, I thought it was in my best interest. And I walked into that booth and I prayed to God. I closed my eyes and I said, God, don't let this nigga mess this up, because if he does, we'll never get another chance. Excuse me, y'all. That's what I said. That was my prayer. I prayed to God for that. And I voted for Barack Obama. Because I was proud to see him in that position running for president of the United States for the first time. But oh, did I come to understand that the color of the president don't make no difference. So if the brown man don't make no difference, I guess the orange man don't make no difference either, right? Because it's not about the color. It's about the policy. And when I counsel kids, I want them to be successful. So I try to give them those nuggets that I've learned along the way that might help them in their journey to find success, however they might define that in their life. The definition is theirs, not mine. But a little nugget, a little nudge, a little help, a little information can help you along the way as you traverse this life. So let me tell you what I like to see, y'all. I like to see more Black folks with education. I'd like to see more Black folks with successful careers. I'd like to see more Black folks with higher incomes and the middle class and the 1% income-wise. But under this administration, I haven't seen any helpful signs that that's going to occur. I see an administration working against Black folks, an administration that's contributing to the plight of the Black family, advocating for alphabet people, governmental dependence that pushes fathers out of the home so that the mother can get a government check. Is that what we want for our society? Is anybody trying to do better? Is anybody trying to be better? Let me know what you think, y'all, because they rolling out the old heads on us, the old playbook. They think it's going to work again. Fool me once, shame on you. But our parents got fooled over and over and over and over and over. It's time to change that, y'all. I need you to be a little selfish this year and vote for your own self-interest. Vote for the interests of your family, your economic interests. I need you to be able to buy a house. I need you to be able to buy a car. I need you to be able to start a business and grow it. And this administration has not proven to me that they agree with those sentiments. So we ain't voting for them. What you think? In 2024, I know we just got here, but I expect it to get much worse as this year progresses. Let me know how you feel about this issue. And then rolling out these old timers to try to tell us what we should do and who we should side with, who we should be along with. Mr. Clyburn, you might want to go talk to Charlemagne, because I believe he's in disagreement with you in this here 2024. Y'all like the video?
Cultfig, follow me.